Did she say what kind of animal it was that attacked her?
So yeah, they're saying it's some type of animal attack. Statistically, there's been more animal attacks, mysterious deaths, people gone missing.
In other news, local authorities remain perplexed by the animal attacks.
What attacked you in the woods?
An animal. What else could it have been?
Welcome back to It Was an Animal Attack, home of the supernatural drama series. I'm Fadzai.
And I'm Sandile.
And today we will be continuing and concluding the story of Alaric Saltzman. I didn't say K this time because, as we pointed out last week,
Don't know if it's
canonically we don't know if he has a middle name and if it starts with a K, like in the books.
Kevin, I'm sorry. If I had been your mother, I would have given you the name Kevin. Alaric Saltzman. Before we start, because I'm sure you're going to hear it, we are recording on an incredibly rainy day. We are having a cold front as we speak right now on the west coast of Southern Africa. Potentially all of South Africa, I'm not sure. But at least where we are, it's cold as hell. I'm probably a little sniffly. And the rain is pelting my window. So if you hear a little ambiance in the back, just pretend it's like you put on a YouTube, 10-hour loop, rain sounds to fall asleep to. But then also you've got the two of us shouting in your ear as it happens.
Yes.
And then it'll be fine.
Also, my own little disclaimer, the generally peaceful toddler who lives across the hall from me, I think literally turned 2 this week because she has just been really unsettled of late. Like, it was the 2-year-old at the end of the hall who was always the problem. But now, this little girlie across from me, she's not having the best time.
Bless. Love you, kids. Hope you make it.
Speaking of kids...
That's your best one yet. That was I have to clap for that one.
Thank you. Season 7 is the season in which Elena is absent. She's sleeping. Rick, if you guys will remember, had a terrible season 6 finale. He almost got what he wanted. He was actually savvy enough to be like, let me try and get the hell out of Dodge and leave this dangerous town. But alas, his brother-in-law-to-be butchered his wife, knifed the womb in which his children were gestating. When I say it like that, it sounds weird and scientific, but that is the term.
Strange and clinical. I wasn't going to say anything, but as long as you've called it out.
Developing might be a better synonym. And yeah, Rick ended the season just absolutely heartbroken, absolutely devastated. But Elena told him to, mourn, move on, let the pain in, and then let it go, and you will eventually find yourself in a better place. In the first episode of season 7, Damon has whisked Alaric off to Europe for a guy's getaway trip that Bonnie has accompanied them on so that she can keep an eye on them. So I'm like, okay, not really a guy's trip then, just friends without us needing to use gendered terminology, but whatever.
Bonnie's one of the guys. What are you talking about? She's Damon's bro.
I think they're in Amsterdam.
Yes.
As we see them, Rick and Damon are shit-faced. Damon is making some rather dark but glib jokes about Bonnie dying, I guess, so that he can get Elena back. Bonnie gets annoyed with Damon's jokes and decides to go sightseeing, and Rick asks Damon if he's sure he doesn't want to go with Bonnie. Damon tells Rick, nice try, and says he's not leaving. Alaric insists that he doesn't need a babysitter, but Damon insists that no, he's there for himself, not Alaric. He says that keeping Rick from jumping off a cliff distracts him, Damon, from thinking about how it will be decades before Bonnie dies and he can see Elena again. And I'm like, Damon, I suppose that's the best that I can come to expect from you now. Joking about Rick wanting to end his own life because of the devastation he's experienced.
In reality, though, it is like they're on suicide watch because, as we mentioned last session, that final episode, I don't think Damon was there. And I'm not going to assume they know it happened, but Rick did try to kill himself in that last moment.
Yeah, and he has been through quite a lot for a man who's still in his 30s.
Yeah.
Like, damn. Yeah, Rick just tells him that he's genuinely glad that he's there. And I'm like, oh, it's nice that you guys are friends.
Bros, Oktoberfest, beer, not talking about our feelings.
Stefan calls Damon and asks to speak to Alaric so that Rick can instruct him on how to make a bomb. Stefan wants to kill the heretics. It's a whole thing. Alaric takes the phone and stumbles off and away from Damon and Bonnie, saying that he needs to speak to Stefan somewhere less crowded and public. And I'm like, fair. You are like around tourists in Europe. You can't just be speaking about bombs. comes. But it turns out that Alaric has been faking being drunk. Bonnie realizes this in his absence when Damon takes a taste of the bourbon that Rick left behind and is like, ew, this is the most watered down, disgusting bourbon I've ever had in my life. And then Bonnie examines it and is like, Damon, this is tea.
You want to talk about a sobering moment that makes you go, Damon, you might also be an alcoholic. Why could you not tell that was tea?
I love it. Rick slips away to find a medium in Amsterdam. He's a phony medium, and Alaric asks him about this red gemstone that he wishes to use to communicate with his recently deceased wife. He tricks the medium into exposing himself as a fake by presenting him with a decoy wedding ring. I love it, because he's like, I'll need an object of great importance to make a connection to your dead wife. And Rick's like, here, take this. This was her wedding ring that, she never got to wear because she died tragically before I could put it on her finger. And then the medium takes it and is like, yes, I feel a strong connection. Your wife loved you very much. I can sense her beyond the veil. And Rick's like, yeah, that's not her ring. That's like a cheap knockoff I bought. I already lost the real ring to a previous phony psychic that I met on my travels.
Oh. God, he's having such a rough time.
Damn. Rick quickly becomes upset, and seeing his aggression, the medium very stupidly decides to say, whoa, maybe your wife is better off dead. And I'm like,
why would you?
Why the hell would you say that?
This man's like a whole head and a half taller than you. You've already pissed him off about his dead wife. And that's the thing you're gonna say? Crazy. Far be it from me.
I'm like, what is that? No filter between the brain and the mouth.
Truly.
It slipped out.
Although, if we're in the Netherlands, I've learned very recently, apparently people in the Netherlands just sort of speak without any concern for how things come across. So maybe he was just speaking. Maybe that's just how the Dutch do it.
Oh no. Well, that explains what Pete.
That explains.
No offense to our Netherlanders who might be listening.
No, full offense. Your country colonized us. Have some shame.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think Americans have given the Dutch, this reputation for being super nice.
Yeah, they built the Hague,
amiable.
and then all their history was wiped.
And then I'm like, well, as someone from South Africa, that is not the version of Dutch people that my country knows. Very sorry.
I think we need to remember about the VOC. Y'all know about the VOC? Look up your history, kids.
Yeah, so because this man was dumb enough to tell Rick that maybe his wife was better off dead because he's being mildly aggressive towards a con artist that is trying to take advantage of his grief, Rick loses it and attacks him. He throws him against the wall, starts punching him in the face, and I'm like, you know what? Deserved.
Yeah, deserved, but also it's regressing Rick to rougher times.
Maybe he has a Lockwood ancestor that we don't know about. Back in America, Lily Salvatore arrives in New York and meets Enzo at some bar or whatever. She's like, Enzo, I need you to find this red gemstone that was a very dear possession of mine. I initially believed it lost when the ship that me and my heretic kids were traveling on in 1903 was burned. But I've learned that it was discovered by divers and recovered from the ocean, and the stone had been on display in New York's Maritime Museum, but has recently gone missing. Damon and Bonnie, by the end of the episode, return to Virginia and presumably bring Rick with them, because we don't get a scene of them locating him or the three of them traveling back to the States together. So I guess...
I just assume they all came back, yeah.
I'm just like, would there not have been a conversation had about, hey, why were you faking being drunk and where did you go? But the show doesn't show us that.
I can't be searching for consistency or reason in these last 4 seasons of this show, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. At the end of the episode, we see that Rick has been bribing a morgue employee to keep Joe's dead body on ice. Read preserved. The doctor assumes that it is because Rick cannot bring himself to start the healing process, and he tells Rick that, apparently you can only really start to mourn your loved one once they've been buried. And then Alaric is like, well, I have no intention of burying Joe. I'm going to bring her back to life. And then when he sees how stunned the doctor is by hearing this, he's like, JK, lol. I'm just joking. It's gallows humor. Take a joke, dude.
God, I really like Rick. I hate that he's going through so much because this character is just so...
Rick asks to see Joe's corpse. It's very sad and kind of creepy that, he continues to gaze wistfully at this ghostly white cadaver. In the next episode, Alaric gives a lecture at Whitmore College, because he still works there, about death in like a supernatural, folkloric, occult-based capacity, I assume. He speaks about how most cultures have myths about beings who are able to cheat death, and says that this is because the human mind has difficulty accepting the reality of something so conceptually unbelievable as a life simply ceasing to exist. Which I'm like, yeah, that's true. And in fact, it's interestingly linked to why this show exists in the first place. One of the writers, not Julie, one of the head writers, had recently lost someone. And when they were presented with like this book and someone was like, hey, do you want to adapt this? They were like, oh, this is an interesting story about this girl whose parents are gone. He was inspired to make this story about like grief and death and how that factors into, you know, the vampire craze that was all the rage at that time.
Is it, I'm trying to think, is it Kevin Williamson isn't a writer. He co-created and produced the show. Is it Rebecca Sonnenschein? I'm trying to figure out like
I think it was a man.
Oh, okay.
Whoever he was, I think he's the person who's usually mentioned after Julie, but I could be wrong.
That might be Kevin Williamson. He made Scream, actually. Made a lot of different like big horror or like thriller kind of projects. He's also a queer man.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Alaric also acknowledges that his occult studies class is really full because people have recently become fascinated with Mystic Falls and its newly acquired status as a cordoned-off ghost town. People have made a habit of journeying to the town to go looking for whatever spooky terrors might be rumored to lurk there. And then they die because the heretics eat them.
Yeah.
So, you know, guys.
What are you gonna do? Just heretic things.
Alaric assures everyone that Mystic Falls is not worth seeing, and all they will obtain by going there is a trespassing ticket. So he's trying to do his part. He's like, don't go there, kids. And I'm like, you as a college professor telling them this is going to make them want to go more. I don't know if you don't watch movies.
There is that.
I do love that he's giving this lecture on, you know, our backwards ancestors and their belief in, you know, the ability to cheat death.
As he is actively trying to bring his dead wife back to life.
Actively trying to resurrect his wife, has himself come back from limbo, has multiple vampire friends.
Yeah. And I guess all of that too is what's fueling him now as he attempts this, because like we said, at present, the other side doesn't exist anymore. Presumably where his wife would have gone if she had died while it was still around. Where she's gone now, I mean, I was gonna say it's kind of a question mark. It's not. You assume she would go to peace or oblivion, but he's convinced, and I think he says in this episode, we're always finding loopholes. There's always a way to like get something done supernaturally. So there must be a way to find Jo and bring her back wherever her spirit or soul is out there.
He's not wrong. I mean, the Vampire Diaries as a show literally ends with a loophole being exploited. It's not even explained. Bonnie's like, I managed to undo Kai's spell that he warned me I'd never be able to undo.
I just kind of did it. We've even stopped bothering to explain it in a succinct way. Just accept that it is true.
After class, I guess Bonnie's in this class now. Good for her. She's like, no, I'm not going to make a Harry Potter reference. It's fine.
She's assumedly still in her first year, because I can't imagine between death and anchor duties she's gotten anything done. I refuse to believe that this girl is not just starting freshman year again.
He speaks to Bonnie. She's checking up on him. She's like, are you okay? Because, you know, Damon told me what you were doing in Europe. So I guess off screen, he admitted to Damon that he's been speaking to mediums. And now Damon has told Bonnie. Alaric acknowledges that he was losing money to a series of con artists, but that he's over it now. And I'm like, yeah, sure, Rick. Okay. Bonnie literally tells him that it's okay to not be okay.
Sometimes
my
it's
millennial
queen. Who sings that song? Is that Jessie J?
Oh, I don't know.
It's okay not to be okay.
We're reaching into the 2010s. Like deep into the early 10s.
It might have been released at this point.
I remember It's Okay to Not Be Okay from like every teenager's BBM status in 2010.
Oh, sure.
It was that, and when they were in a good mood, it was, I'm friends with the monster that's under my bed. Get along with the voices inside of my head.
That song was a reset brackets derogatory. I could not escape.
You know, for years I had not heard the song. I was just like, what is this quote that people are always... And then I heard it and I was like, this is Rihanna?
I was going to
How
say,
did I miss this?
You weren't there for the era of the Eminem-Rihanna collab, the 3 years of just continual, we're putting out another one, guys.
Oh, was that... I only knew Love the Way You Lie.
It was Love the Way You Lie. It was Love the Way You Lie Part 2.
Oh, okay.
There might be another one that's like a Rihanna song with Eminem on it, and then it was Monster. But yeah, I truly was just like, I don't know, guys. I think I'm over this. Millennials don't come after me. Gen Z are trying to cancel Eminem. Well, hold on. You've seen that, right?
I have.
Okay, good.
So yeah, Bonnie's like, it's okay if you're not okay. And she says that, frankly, she's a little offended that he didn't come to her first with this, like, supernatural problem. And I'm like, that's the writer's room reminding us that Bonnie is the Band-Aid for all your issues.
Right. Because I'm like, Bonnie and Alaric aren't friends. So what does she mean by that? Is that, like, I'm here for all your supernatural needs, you know?
You know?
So...
Alaric is like, oh, you don't think it's weird that I'm trying to contact Jo beyond the grave months after her death? Bonnie rightfully states that after everything the Mystic Falls gang has experienced, it would be weird if he wasn't trying this. And then Alaric asks her, have you ever heard of the Phoenix Stone?
Ooh.
Dum dum dum. He tells Bonnie that he heard about the Phoenix Stone from an old contact of his at Duke. In brackets, yeah, I have Vanessa Monroe.
God,
and then within those brackets, I have Nora Dark.
Brackets for our queen. It's what she deserves.
The stone is supposed to have resuscitative powers. That is a word that does not roll off my tongue easily.
It does something good in my brain, so I appreciate you saying it.
Bonnie's like, well, where'd you get it? He says, I stole it from the Maritime Museum
Yeah.
in New York City when we traveled there. And it's like, oh no. Not two completely separate characters happening to be after the same thing in the same season.
Not the constant conceit of a Vampire Diaries season. Whatever will we do? But also, we're in our Indiana Jones era, just stealing a stone that probably belongs to some culture that he's not from. To be fair, he's stealing it from an American museum.
You know,
like,
Robin Hood.
in my head, I'm also like, what if that was an indigenous exhibit and now you've just snatched that stone, you bastard?
Oh no! Bonnie also realizes that this trip was yet another occasion on which Rick pretended to be drunk to give her and Damon the slip. So, you know, he's been doing this apparently. Bonnie examines the stone and tries to get a reading on it, and then she gets a sudden brief vision of people dying and shrieking in pain, and tells Rick that there is something wrong with the Phoenix Stone, something evil. And then she's like, but your friend from Duke already told you that, didn't they? And this is why you waited until you were flat out desperate before coming to me.
We're making a lot of bad decisions. We're in the sea of grief. It's not a good time.
Stages of grief, you know? I guess right now he's in denial. And he's
Yeah.
like, I can find a way to fix this, even though the rules of the universe, as I understand them, are telling me no.
And your experience with the magical is telling you this path you're trying to take is probably bad.
Bonnie tells him, we can't mess with this magic. You have to destroy the stone. And then she leaves him to it.
Sure
Amazing
does.
faith in your grieving friend, Bonnie.
Sure does.
Because later on, Rick is alone in what I assume is one of the chem labs at Whitmore College, and he like tests the corrosive properties of this chemical inside a beaker, drops the ordinary stone inside, the stone like disintegrates and dissolves, and Rick is like, well, that works. However, as he goes to do the same to the Phoenix Stone, he looks at a picture of himself and Jo and hesitates. Shouldn't have done that.
And listen, I don't want to say, because here's one thing I'll say, it's never Bonnie's fault, but I do wish you would have just taken that stone.
Should have held his hand while he
Because
did
I don't know
it.
why you'd leave it with this grieving man who's very clearly making irresponsible decisions.
Bonnie, who is elsewhere, gets a sudden frightening surge of visions, like the ones that she experienced when holding the Phoenix Stone. They overwhelm her to the point of unconsciousness, and this almost costs Matt his life because
Yeah.
they're in the midst of her trying to resuscitate him after a heart-stopping spell. Thankfully, she wakes up several minutes later, just in time to prevent like permanent damage to his body and brain and bring him back. But that night, Bonnie and Alaric talk on the phone, and he lies to her that he did indeed destroy the Phoenix Stone, when we can see that he is holding the perfectly intact red gem in his hand.
After she tells him that it hurt her. And he's like, oh, no, don't know what that's about. God damn it. He's grieving, it's fine.
He's grieving. He is grieving. He has lost so much. He goes to the morgue and is about to get Joe's body out of storage, but then he pauses and is like, as an academic, let's conduct an experiment on something expendable first. And he goes over to some random cadaver instead and places the Phoenix Stone on the chest of this dead body. And suddenly the man wakes up gasping. Rick quickly snatches the stone back from him, and the body returns to being a corpse. In the next episode, Damon is staying with Alaric at his house since Shea Salvatore has been taken over by Lily and her band of misfits.
Sure has.
Rick seems less than enthused by his house guest. Like, Damon is strutting around in nothing but a towel, and Rick is like, all right, how long do you plan on crashing with me? Like,
I don't need to see your unmentionables the moment I wake up. Like, this relationship is not like that.
He says you could compel yourself a whole sorority house if you wanted. And in brackets here, I have Rick, no! Like, why would you say this? Damon assures Rick that it's just until they're able to locate and capture the lost heretic, Oscar, so that they can trade him for Elena's missing coffin, which Lily has swiped. Bonnie then arrives, bursting in to see Alaric, like, seated in front of a towel-clad Damon, and she's like, please tell me I'm not interrupting something. And I'm like, all right, Bonnie, allow Alaric to grieve in his own way. If Damon wants to help him...
This trio of, like, potentially, hypothetically bi people. It's like, we'd never actually do it, but, like, we keep suggesting.
You know? Oh, gosh. Bonnie has such bi flavoring this season, but we can talk about it in the Bonnie episode. Like,
the haircut, the outfits, the Nora.
The Nora of it all. Bonnie's like, I'm still having Phoenix Stone visions. Did you destroy the stone like you promised you would? And Alaric's like, yeah, I watched it dissolve in hydrochloric acid. And then Bonnie's like, are you sure? And Rick is like, Bonnie, the stone is gone. Like, gaslighting.
Third time. He lies the first time, twice in this conversation. God, always a man.
Alaric, Bonnie, and Damon go to Myrtle Beach to capture Oscar. Bonnie says she wants Oscar to siphon away her visions first. And Alaric is like, surprised. And then Bonnie's like, well, the visions are magic, so a siphon should be able to get rid of them. Damon looks at Alaric and is like, Rick, any other ideas on how to rid Bonnie of this mysterious pain that she's in? And I'm like, wait, does he know?
He knows. He knew the whole time.
We later on find out that he did indeed know the whole time.
And you know what? He said, I'm not going to say anything to my best friend, Bonnie. I'm not involved. Don't involve me in this drama. It's like, oh, okay.
But I also guess, you know, when your two besties are fighting, what do you do?
She's having horrifying visions that are knocking her out. I think you tell her what's going on.
I guess. And one of them is actively lying to the other. So it's like, I love you both, but, you know, you're being dishonest.
The thing, too, that pisses me off is that in this episode, he'll be on the phone with Lillian, like, I don't need you anymore. I found my new family. And they do a wide shot of Damon, Alaric, and Bonnie in this room. And I'm like, this dysfunctional ass, we're lying to each other. We don't care who's in pain and who's whatever. This is what you're flexing with? All right, far be it from me.
These Vampire Diaries characters, their biological families are dysfunctional. They really don't know what family is supposed to look like when everything is at peace.
So true.
They're at peace when they die and go to heaven in the epilogue.
How do you seek out something healthier when you don't know what it looks like? Oh,
you know? The three of them are shocked when they find Oscar and he greets Damon with like enthusiasm and familiarity. Oscar invites them into his room, but he easily detects Alaric's vervain gun. He's like, holster that thing so we can all be comfortable. As Oscar talks about his post-prison world life and his newfound freedom, Bonnie brings up her haunting visions. Oscar begins to siphon the visions from Bonnie's head, but as he does so, he receives flashes of the terrifying images that have been stuck inside her mind, and he's immediately shaken and asks where the Phoenix Stone is. Alaric tries to vervain dart him, but Oscar magically flings the gun from his hand, telekinetically chokes out the two mortals in the room, and snaps Damon's neck. When Rick and Bonnie wake up, Damon has already revivified, and he tells Bonnie that her visions are gone, but Oscar is too. And Alaric tells them that, oh no, Oscar's taken the Phoenix Stone. And Bonnie's like, how can that be possible when you destroyed it already?
Ridiculous. What the hell are you talking about?
Alaric doesn't answer. He's just like, we need to find Oscar immediately. And then Bonnie clocks that Damon doesn't seem surprised to learn that Alaric was carrying around this stone the whole time. And she's like, did you know? And Damon's like, yeah, I did, but like, don't put this on me. This is your drama. Talk to each other. I'm gonna go find Oscar.
With friends like these, I'm telling you.
Bonnie rounds on Alaric and asks him if all the mental torment the Phoenix Stone has been putting her through just didn't matter to him. And Alaric is like, of course it matters, but bringing Joe back matters more. Bonnie's like, you don't even know what the stone does or if it'll work. And Alaric reminds her that, well, we've both died as well, and we were able to be resurrected and get our second chance. So Bonnie tells him that that's only because we were both on the other side. And in her case, briefly an alternate reality prison world. The other side no longer exists. Rick says, okay, Joe is the love of my life, and if there is even a 1% chance that this could work, I need to take it, no matter how dangerous or insane it may be. Because if I don't, I'm gonna spend the rest of my life wishing I'd stayed dead.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay, so he is on suicide watch.
Exactly.
Okay, it's deep. It is that deep.
It's that deep.
Damon is able to find Oscar. They talk about some Confederate nonsense and some Lily Salvatore drama that I'm not getting into.
That's fine.
Watch
Go
the
back
Damon
to the
and
Lily
episodes.
episode. You'll get it all there.
He's about to stake Damon, and then Bonnie and Alaric arrive just in time to save him. Bonnie attacks him with the aneurysm spell, Rick shoots him with vervain darts, and this allows Damon the opportunity to knock Oscar out. And I'm like, you know what? You three are dysfunctional AF, but I love this little trio of like the rogue
D&D
vampire,
strategy, yeah.
the vampire hunter, and the witch. Bonnie then goes to pick up the Phoenix Stone that Oscar had dropped in all the commotion. She walks over to Rick, and then this is unbelievable. She hands it to him, and I guess entrusts him to get rid of it again, or I guess just decides we're gonna have this debate later. Because as she gives it to him, she just glares and says, "Never lie to me again." And I'm like, oh, we're still
accepting,
okay.
Because he didn't lie to you once. He has lied to you 3 times. But we're just like, you know what? That's fine. Because I'm Bonnie and you need your story to progress. I'd never give that man that stone again.
Yeah.
Never.
I'd be like, even if I'm considering helping you, I am going to hold on to this.
Right.
Because now I know I can't trust you. You're like a child who was irresponsible with their toys and I'm taking it away.
Late 30s man. I'm barely 20. I've died twice. And you know what? The fact that he said it, and I know he said it because, again, his wife died and his unborn children as well with her. To tell me the danger to me and the threat to me matters less than you maybe bringing back your dead wife from wherever she is. I understand is a thing you can say as a grieving husband, but is a thing that would certainly let me know where I stand in your life.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's just me. But Bonnie's clearly cool with that.
Bonnie about to go on Twitter and start subtweeting about fake friendships and how
You
people
know?
use you and people show you how much you matter to them.
That's what I'm telling you. Friends like these, one man's about to let you get hit by a car because he'll bring his girlfriend back. Another man's ready to let you be overrun by psychic visions to unconsciousness because he's trying to bring his wife back. It's like, oh, so you don't matter to either of those people. Bestie.
Gosh. And these are people who used to be children in your care, Alaric. You were the den mother of this gang. Later on, Bonnie talks to Alaric as she reads through some nondescript tome. Bonnie asks him if he's sure he understands what he's trying to do, because she clarifies that it's not as though Joe's spirit is behind a veil that they can lift and cause her to magically appear. And Bonnie says, this is necromancy. And I'm like, I mean, I would argue you guys have been pretty necromantic for a while, but okay, fine. Your show, your rules, your magic
You
system.
know, I would certainly call what Bonnie did multiple times before necromancy. She brought people back from the dead.
Also, Bonnie, you're confusing me now because you've just told Rick you don't think this can be done, but then you also have this classification for it that is separate from everything else you've done, and you're calling this necromancy with such confidence that I'm like, so which is it? Is it possible or not? Is it like this theoretical magical field?
I guess maybe she was suggesting, and this is just me doing legwork and like filling blanks, but like maybe she was suggesting raising the body without a soul in it, because that was the point she was making in this conversation, right? That like Joe's soul doesn't exist for them to pull back, or yanking a soul from peace rather than like the catchment area of the other side. That would be necromancy.
Interesting.
I don't know. They certainly don't get into it.
Alaric tells Bonnie that he wants to show her something, and he takes her to the morgue where Joe's body is being kept for him. Bonnie looks so uncomfortable in this moment. I'm like, she's really thinking, now why am I in it?
Why am I in this? I knew this woman. Now you're just showing me her dead body months after she's died. This is crazy.
And then Rick says, and I'm like, okay, this man is deeply in denial at this stage. Rick says, Joe's still in there. She has to be. And I'm like, still trapped inside her corpse?
He's not well. It's the only thing to be said of this.
He tells her that he knows what he's getting himself into. He just can't do it alone. And I'm like, no, Rick, I don't think you do.
He does not.
Though seeming rather uneasy, Bonnie agrees to try. Oh, here we're in the flash forward era, at least for Rick.
Let's go! Because in case you forgot, baby, this is the season where we do a 3-year time jump and we're existing in both time periods at once. Is it confusing? Yes, absolutely.
It is. I wrote that font in a different color.
Oh, wow. I wish I was that organized.
In a flash forward to 3 years in the future, we see Alaric working strenuously at some wires and circuitry. It appears at first as though he's trying to defuse a bomb. However, it's ultimately revealed that he's in his kitchen attempting to repair the inner workings of a toy baby doll. He's unsuccessful and tosses the doll aside frustratedly. And then 2 little girls, who are definitely too large to be 3-year-olds, show up and ask if the doll is fixed yet. And Alaric's like, not yet, and sends them to bed. The girls run off to get ready for bed, and Alaric calls out to one of them and tells her to help her sister find her pajamas. And he addresses the girl as Josie. And it's like, okay. Rick suddenly realizes that the girls have gone silent. He's immediately wary and goes to get his shotgun.
Yep, there you go.
And I'm like, this is a Southern man.
Old habits die hard. I'm a Texas man, strong. It's like when he's from Boston, Massachusetts, but his family's from Texas.
So he comes to the hallway and sees the 2 little girls standing in front of the open door looking at Damon, who's in the doorway. Alaric seems distrusting of Damon and less than pleased to see him. Damon asks Alaric why he looks so grim, noting that it seems like he got everything he wanted. Alaric says that the fact that Damon is there means that someone has died, and Damon clarifies that no one's died yet, but that could change really fast if you don't do what I say. Flash forward to the future. Rick has kids.
Yeah.
Was he successful with this resurrection? Did he and Zombie Joe have kids?
That is the question that's posed right then. It's like, did he resurrect Joe and then somehow, by extension, resurrected the kids in her womb? Or none of that worked, and then he just adopted 2 kids and then named them for Joe? Because I don't think we hear the other kid's name yet.
Yeah, we don't hear the other kid's name.
And it's like, in some way, he's trying to live out at least some part of the life he would have had, which is like, in a way, still kind of unhealthy, but also it's like, at least you are moving forward and like, I don't know where you would have found twins. Just adopted twins.
He found 2 girls of the same age and said, "You're twins now."
You're twins, it's fine.
My Gemini babies.
Because to be fair, one is blonde and one is like raven haired. So like,
they're
where
definitely fraternal. But I mean, it does track. You know, Luke and Liv and Kai and Joe were also fraternal. So back in the present, it's Halloween and Alaric is hanging out in the morgue again. The technician shows up and he's just so startled to see Alaric there because it's like 5 a.m. And Alaric is like, "I'm gonna need the place to myself today." And the technician is like,
"What?
Please don't make me an accomplice to whatever weird stuff you're gonna do with your wife's dead body."
And he's right to say that, because to be fair, what else would you be doing here? Asking for the whole room.
Alaric literally says, "You have no idea how weird it's gonna get."
This man.
And then he whips out another wad of cash and asks if it buys them some privacy. And the easily bribed employee takes the money and reminds Rick that preserved bodies still have an expiration date. Which is what I was thinking. I was like, how long can Joe sit here? Because
you don't just get to freeze it forever.
He warns Rick that this will be Joe's last day in the morgue. So I'm like, I don't know what this joke was for. He was like, she doesn't have to go home, but she can't stay here. And I'm like, dude, this is not the time or the place to make that bartender
the joke is he's a bartender. Exactly. He's cutting Rick off. His tab is getting closed up whether he likes it or not. I kind of love that. Gallows humor, like you said.
He's like, this is the dynamic you created, Rick. This is the
I'm just going along. You paid me to be
the
the comic relief in this dire shit you've got going on.
Bonnie arrives at the morgue and tells Rick that whether or not she's capable, he is lucky that she's willing to try. And she adds that the visions from the Phoenix Stones scare the hell out of her, so he's not going to rush her while she attempts to do this. Then Damon bursts in with Oscar's dead body and is like, well, that's too bad, Bonnie, because we got to bring this guy back to life now. Bonnie attempts to cast various spells in order to activate the stone's resurrective power, but she's not having much success beyond like causing Oscar's eyes to open. Alaric gets frustrated and Damon more so, and then Bonnie's like, the stone is creating a bridge between the body and the spirit. She just needs to find a spell that makes that bridge permanent. As Stefan phones Damon to talk to him, Bonnie's next spell inadvertently causes the body to catch fire.
There you go.
Bonnie eventually tries a spell, which she says she found in one of Alaric's shamanistic oral traditions. At first, nothing happens, but then suddenly Oscar wakes up screaming. Later on, Damon, Rick, and Bonnie lug Oscar to their car so that they can get him back to Lily in exchange for Elena's coffin. Oscar is ravenous for blood, and Damon suspects that it's a side effect of his resurrection, which I'm like, you have no reason. You just made that up, Damon, but
He's
okay.
always doing that. In season 4, when Elena couldn't keep blood down, he was like, this is your doppelganger shit. And they keep letting him get away with it.
Damon with his headcanon. Gosh.
Stupid as hell.
Bonnie says that she barely understands how Oscar is alive, and that if hunger is the worst consequence of the spell, then they all got off easy.
No one is acting normal. Everyone's being so irresponsible. I hate it.
Damon does ask her if she's sure she wants to do this to Joe. And Alaric is like, well, it's now or never. In a nice moment for Damon, he's like, no offense, Rick, but I was asking Bonnie. And I'm like, there we go. He's like, she's the one who's going to have to go through this and who will be responsible for whatever happens afterwards. So this is not about you and your biased opinion on the matter.
I love the bare minimum.
At the end of the episode, we see Bonnie casting a spell on the Phoenix Stone as it lies on Joe's chest. Rick holds her hand. Finally, the deathly pale, still deathly pale, I must add, body of Josette Laughlin, née Parker, almost Saltzman, opens her eyes. And it's like, oh my gosh, it worked! Except this is TVD, so we know.
Didn't for a second believe it worked because that would be nonsense.
In the next episode, Alaric is watching over Joe's sleeping form. Bonnie comes in and asks how Joe is doing, and Rick is like, well, Joe's been sleeping for 12 hours. Is that normal? And Bonnie's like, she was dead yesterday and now she's alive, so I'm not sure normal applies. She also tells Rick that she's come to deliver him his student term papers, which have been jamming up his inbox. And she's like, reminder, you're still employed as a professor
at
Whitmore College.
And now I'm your assistant, apparently. Like, what's happening?
Rick jokingly offers to hire her as his TA, and Bonnie's like, nope, I'm too busy trying to figure out exactly how I brought your dead wife back. For his part, Alaric is more than willing to not look this gift horse in the mouth. He's like, Joe is here, and she's okay. What does it matter now? And I'm like, she's okay?
You've not even
She's been
spoken
asleep
to
for
her.
12 hours.
She's sleeping the sleep of the dead. They didn't make that expression for nothing.
Well, Bonnie says that she wants to figure out what kind of magic she was dealing with in case she's opened up what she calls Pandora's Rock. And to that end, she asks Rick to give her back the Phoenix Stone. Rick gives it to her because he's like, I don't need this anymore.
Yeah, got what I wanted.
She leaves. After she's gone, Joe opens her eyes. Rick is like, oh, how are you doing? And she's like, I'm starving. And I'm like, oh, no. A little while later, they're like eating Thai food. Well, Joe is eating Thai food on her own. I think Rick is in the other room. And she's like staring at the television. And Alaric comes in and she's like, is that art? The TV is off at this point. She doesn't know what a TV is. So Rick is like, that's a TV. And she's like, TV. She repeats the word like she's never heard it before.
Never. And of course, he's in his mind is like, oh, her brain must just be coming back to life. This is fine.
She's still booting up. She starts listing off information that Alaric has given her, such as her name, his nickname, and the fact that they were married. And Alaric's like, oh, don't stress over the details. It will take some time for your memories to return. In brackets, I have, based on what, Alaric? You just made that up. Cue that meme. You just made that up.
Everyone is making it up this season.
Joe tells him that the Thai food is amazing, and she's like, did you make this? And Alaric's like, no, this is delivery food. And she's like, I don't know what that means.
Delivery.
And he's like, it means the meal was made somewhere else and then driven over to us by a delivery person.
Driven?
He's like, Thai is your favorite except the dishes that include meat because you're a vegetarian. And then Joe's like, why wouldn't I eat meat? And Rick is like, admittedly, I have no idea.
Okay. Okay, Rick. It's not your opportunity to shade the vegetarians and the vegans, I think.
Rick then goes to open a celebratory bottle of wine, day drinking as usual.
There we go.
He accidentally cuts his hand opening the bottle. And in a moment that it's like, oh, maybe she is her old self. Joe looks at the cut and determines it's not serious. And she's like, I'm going to bandage the wound.
Yeah.
And Rick is like, okay, cool. That's where the first aid kit is kept. Have at it. And as she walks off, he's like, yeah, I think
this is
we're
fine.
Good. I think this is fine. I think it's okay.
This is all right. We were kind of shaky for a bit there, but then she did something medical, and I know she was medical. So this is okay.
Close enough. Bonnie goes over to Shea Salvatore to speak to Oscar and get more info on the Phoenix Stone. Bonnie tries to talk to Oscar, asking him if he remembers her from Myrtle Beach, where they first met. As with Damon in the previous episode, Oscar tells her that he's never been to Myrtle Beach. He tells her that he does remember her, though, from that dark room in the basement. And he's like, you're the one who got me out. Bonnie shows him the Phoenix Stone, and Oscar states that the stone itself is what she got him out of. And I was like, wait.
Hold on now.
Hold on. Valerie, Stefan, and Damon, off somewhere else, are searching for Julian's body. Valerie tells them that Lily plans to reunite Julian's dead body with his soul, which is currently trapped in the Phoenix Stone. Although Damon tries to pretend he doesn't know what the Phoenix Stone is, Valerie reveals that she knows that the stone is the only way they could have traded Oscar over for Elena, because the Phoenix Stone is full of dead vampire souls, and rather than resurrecting Oscar, they simply placed one of those souls from the stone into his corpse and resuscitated it.
You see what happens when you mess with shit you don't understand, when you do a spell with no research, when you force my girl Bonnie to do shit for you and she has to be on a rush order.
Yeah, so Damon phones Bonnie and tells her that, yeah, Joe is not Joe at all, just some random vampire soul from inside the Phoenix Stone that's been jammed into Joe's corpse. And then Bonnie's like, oh, so the Oscar that I'm talking to right now is also some random vampire. And Damon's like, yeah. Anyway, so you break the bad news to Alaric, because I don't want to.
I hate him!
Enzo tries to get the stone from Bonnie as she leaves the Salvatore house, which I guess at this point is technically Shea Heretic. But
It's the heretic house, yes.
Alaric offers to take quote-unquote Joe on a walk around campus to judge her memory. Oh, and I call her Joant.
No! Not Jones!
Unfortunately, Joan has discovered the wedding dress that Joe was murdered in. Alaric kept it after her death. And she asks, what happened to me? And Alaric is like, well, you were stabbed by your brother who had a lifelong vendetta against you, and I couldn't get you to the hospital in time.
Yeah.
But he's like trying to avoid explaining all the details, you know, probably reluctant to get into the necromancy of it all. And Joan becomes more agitated and frustrated, and suddenly she stops and says that she remembers being stabbed in the heart. And Alaric's like, no. Kai actually stabbed you in the back. He came at you from behind. Joan is like, no, I was stabbed in the heart. I know that. And Alaric tries to get her to calm down. And then she pulls a pistol out of nowhere. I don't know if Alaric just has guns lying around now.
I would assume so. But also, Meredith?
Meredith's old gun. She's like, don't touch me. Stay away from me. And she runs out of his place.
Yeah.
Bonnie calls Rick, who is still searching for Joe, and tells him the truth about his wife's supposed resurrection. Alaric at first doesn't want to believe her, but then she explains that the person inhabiting Joe's body is not Joe. And he actually kind of accepts it pretty quickly. And I'm like, yeah, I think deep down you knew this was too good to be true.
Absolutely.
Alaric. Like,
we've been doing the denial thing for a couple of episodes now, and this was the thing he needed to finally break free of that.
Bonnie asks where he is, and she's like, I can come by with Damon and I can help you figure this out. She's being very tender and sweet because she understands this must be crushing. He's basically losing Joe all over again.
Yeah.
But Rick is like, no, I have to go because he's found not Joe staring at her reflection in a shop window. I guess it's the first time she's seen her face. Well, not her face. He approaches her. And he's like, I just want to talk. Joan gives back the pistol that she swiped. And she's like, I actually realize I have no idea how to use this. I'm like, damn, what era are you from? Shame.
She's so
And she
sweet.
tells him nothing about this world feels familiar to her. Not him, not the street outside, not even her own reflection. And Alaric is like, yeah, you're not my wife.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I don't think I am. And then she asks, who am I? And Rick says, I don't know, but you're not alone. And he promises that he will help her and they will figure this out together. And I'm like, okay, at least taking responsibility for what you've done.
Because you've now brought this woman from whatever torment lived within that stone, transplanted her into a world she does not recognize, and now she's just here and she's suffering. So, yeah, figure it out.
In the next episode, it's another flash forward to 3 years in the future. Damon is still at Rick's house, and Alaric's two little girls are in the other room. Damon asks Alaric when last he spoke to his fiancée. Now that the audience knows it isn't really Joe who was brought back, I assume they expect us to believe he either fell in love with the person inhabiting her body and had kids with her, or he eventually found someone else.
Which would be so crazy. I mean, listen, not not to hold Rick back from trying to figure it all out again. But honestly, it's like, how do you do it, man? How do you try again?
Rick says that, oh, we last texted in the afternoon. And Damon's like, well, your fiance, who they don't call by name.
They're playing the name game.
They're like, well, she's not answering her phone now. And Rick is like, well, she doesn't like to answer her phone before a broadcast. And Damon is like, well, get her on the phone because Stefan is being hunted. It's Raina Cruz. And it's only a matter of time before Caroline is used as bait to lure Stefan out. Then Caroline appears on the TV under duress. She's a hostage and she's like, oh, I have a message for Stefan Salvatore. And then Damon looks at Rick and says, looks like the old ball and chain won't be home for dinner after all. And if you're not reading between the lines, you might still not know what's going on. So I won't get into it yet. Back in the present, Alaric is watching video footage of his wedding and Bonnie gives him a phone call. She tells him that Faux Jo, it's a much better name than what I was calling her.
I like Joan better. It's so much shorter. And
Joan.
It's so pithy. It's so quick.
Faux Jo/Joan is currently at the bar holding her laptop like a book. And reminds Rick that he promised to help his not-quite wife before she did something crazy. And Rick is like, yeah, well, I'm taking a break because every time I look into her eyes, I see my murdered wife. And Bonnie acknowledges that the situation must be impossible for Rick, but says that they have no idea what is going to happen to Joan, so they need to keep an eye on her. And Alaric's like, well, why can't you do it? And Bonnie's like, girl, I have to deal with all the drama between Lily Salvatore and her sons, so please get here now.
Trying to make it all my job.
Gosh.
Your weaponized incompetence ass. I'll kill you.
Alaric eventually gets to the bar, but by that time, he finds that Faux Jo has actually managed to successfully operate the laptop. He goes over to her and he's like, oh, you figured out how to use the internet. And Joe's like, yeah, one of the bar's patrons have showed me how to use WebMD, and I've concluded that I have a form of retrograde amnesia. And she prattles off like specific medical conditions that she's ruled out as possibilities. And Alaric is like watching her speak with all this like medical know-how and doctor jargon, and he's like, if only you were her, my sweet
wife's
Josette.
face is speaking the way she used to speak when she was alive, but it's not her.
Then a student approaches them and greets Joe. This scene is insane.
Yeah.
She's surprised to see Joe, as she has heard that Joe was on sabbatical. They haven't told people that Joe is dead?
Yeah.
She died at her own wedding ceremony, a very public setting at a very conspicuous event. How on earth have they managed to get away with keeping her death a secret?
I have never thought about this. There were certainly like employees at that wedding, like servers, a photographer. Like there were people at that wedding who were not Geminis and not the Mystic Falls gang. What happened to them?
Certainly.
With the catering companies, the wedding planner or the wedding planner entity, like when they came back to like clean up, what did they find? Yeah. How many people did we have to compel? Are we just faking all their disappearances? They're all just not dead?
No, you're right, because when Faux Jo doesn't recognize the girl, Alaric hints to Joan that she should pretend she knows the girl. So Faux Jo is like, oh yes, I know you, my star pupil. And the girl's like, really? You gave me a C. But then she asks how Joe's honeymoon was. So I'm like, okay, so they've definitely covered up her death, because they're even like, yes, she got married. They've told people she got married and she's been away. So were Matt, Tyler, Elena, Bonnie, Caroline, and the Salvatores the only guests at this wedding who weren't from the Gemini Coven? Because that's the only way they could have gotten away with with this, if Kai managed to kill all the guests.
For sure, I don't question on the guest end that it was just the Geminis and the Mystic Falls, because Joe did not have any friends. We established our only friends were these college kids. So that's fine. I'm just saying there were people working that wedding. Unless it was Geminis who were pitching in, which I doubt. I think there were people...
Maybe they have like a hierarchy, like how in the royal family,
Right.
Someone's like page boy is your third cousin.
We need the Squire Geminis to work the wedding. No, there were definitely people that Caroline was coordinating because she was in charge of the wedding, and I don't think she was doing all the work. So they would have had to compel all those people if they didn't die.
Yeah, that's like either Kai killed all these innocent people and then you compelled everyone they know.
Right.
Or some of these people survived and you compelled them to forget this horrible thing they had been through. How did you have the wherewithal to do that in the midst of Joe's death, Bonnie being linked to Elena who was being put to sleep,
Yes.
Tyler's werewolf curse being re-triggered?
It's just like, I guess it was Caroline, as usual, type A-ing her way through the trauma, just being like, we need to fix this. Somebody get on that. She's triaging everyone to go through the compulsion line. With where are all our available vampires? I need somebody in room 2.
Gosh, just a lot of compulsion.
The worst thing is that Rick is back at school teaching. So everybody thinks that he is now a married man whose wife is just on sabbatical. Because they know Dr. Bourbon and Dr. Medical Center had a thing. Surely they knew that. They're coming up to him and being like, so how's Dr. Laughlin? Is she coming back? Did y'all hyphenate? What's the situation? I need to know. And he's just faking it?
And he's like, she's on sabbatical? Like, what, the honeymoon was that good? She's still recovering? Good for you, girl.
Breaking Dawn Part 1 levels of honeymoon. She just needed to rest.
The shadow of the Twilight series forever hangs over us. But yeah, both Joan and Alaric lie that the honeymoon was good. Laura then notices that Fojo's nose is bleeding, and Rick sends Laura off to get some napkins as Fojo starts to cough up blood. And she's like, what the hell is wrong with me? And it's like, oh no.
Yeah, here comes the other shoe.
Even just you existing as not Joe is not gonna take. Like, this is not a permanent thing. Rick has taken Fojo home. Caroline and Valerie are there too, and Rick explains Fojo's sudden symptoms. Caroline offers to heal her with some blood. However, when Fojo drinks from Caroline's wrist, her body rejects the blood. Alaric asks what's wrong with her, and Valerie theorizes that while the Phoenix Stone was able to bring back a random vampire in Oscar's heretic body, Joe's human body is ill-equipped to house the vampire soul that the Phoenix Stone has placed in her. And now she's starting to decompose. I'm not sure why that means that her body would reject vampire blood, but I'm happy to hand wave it and say that, hey, the Phoenix Stone and sword are like vampire-slaying weapons made by vampire-hating hunters, so some sort of magical failsafe to prevent more vampires being sired makes sense. That's fine. Caroline pulls Valerie aside and chastises her for her blunt delivery, because Valerie's very much like, oh, look, the vampire soul is burning through your dead wife's corpse. Guess she's gonna die all over again.
Such a scientific curiosity. I love her.
And Caroline's like, dude, bedside manner, tact. And Valerie states that the body is a corpse that should have stayed a corpse. And I'm like, Valerie, not you being in your Anya Jenkins era. What's going on here?
If there's ever a character I've gained more, it's Valerie's. What's her surname? Valerie Tull. Valerie Tull, I just understand on such a fundamental level. She's such a Capricorn. She's so... she just keeps it real.
Really? I thought she was a Gemini.
Let's go. We got jokes. We got jokes out here.
Caroline tells her that, well, that corpse was supposed to be Alaric's wife, who died with 2 kids in her womb on her wedding day. This moves Valerie to a genuine apology, probably due to her own situation with almost motherhood.
Yeah.
By the end of the night, Joan is looking pale and sickly. I should call her Joandis now.
No. We've veered into insensitivity, I think that one crosses the line.
No! Oh. She appears weak and speaks in a faint, breathy voice as though she's dying. She jokingly asks Rick what WebMD would say about her now, and Rick is like, it's probably best to not find out. Then she tells him that she's finally remembered how she died. A woman was wielding a sword, and it pierced her heart. She points out that the blade was metal, and therefore, as a vampire, it should not have been able to kill her, but it did. She also tells Rick that she's remembered her name, Florence.
Aww.
And I'm like, oh, so she was Flojo the whole time.
Full circle. Full circle.
Florence. I would like to call this arc Florence in the Machine.
Stop. We have to stop. The tower's getting too tall. It's gonna fall down. No.
Alaric says, well, it's nice to meet you, Florence.
Which has to be a Florence Nightingale reference, right?
Yeah, now that you mention it, actually.
Yeah, she's like a wartime nurse is the vibe that you get from her.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's very, very Florence Nightingale. I love that.
Clever. Look at you, Julie and Co. I always say and Co because I don't know precisely what to credit to whom. And I don't want to,
exactly. Like people
not give the others
producers and
writers
writers
their critiques.
and yeah. Y'all can spread it amongst yourselves.
He then apologizes her for putting her through all of this. It's a genuine apology, and I'm like, yeah, you see now that your selfishness has put this poor innocent soul, well, maybe, through the ringer.
Yeah.
We don't really know. Raina later on makes it sound like everyone she's ever slain
is the
deserved
worst
it,
of
but
the
I'm
worst.
Like, Florence seems so sweet.
Yeah. But like we had this discussion in the Raina episode of like, I mean, we're seeing Florence post-death as a vampire soul transplanted into a human body.
Yeah.
We are seeing an experience of her life that could be so far removed from who she was.
Florence tells Alaric that it's okay, and she knows he just wanted his wife back. And she says, I'm sorry I'm not her. I wish I was. She was a lucky woman. You would have been an amazing husband. At this point, Alaric is in tears, and he tells Flo that it's been nice to hear Joe's voice again, and he thanks her for allowing him to say goodbye.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, you know what? Actually, yes, closure.
Yeah.
Because she did die quite suddenly. And sometimes closure can help. It doesn't fix the wound, but it helps get the ball rolling on the healing process.
Yeah, a lot of people in the show don't get to have a goodbye with the people who are dying. Whether they be so removed physically from where that person is when they die, or whether because it happens so suddenly that you just don't get the chance. Whether you are willfully headstrong and your mother's on her deathbed with wood chips racing to her heart and you tell her she made her bed. And you've got to go through a horrifying psychic hell to actually find the closure maybe you need. Yeah, you know, this is one of the best cases.
And then other people in this show get long, epic goodbyes.
True.
So it's like, yeah, why not me?
Why not you? You know?
Lord, I see what you have done for us.
Exactly. It may not be perfect, but this is something.
She dies, and Alaric sobs, but he seems to have gained the closure he's been missing since the wedding. And Caroline watches as he shuts Joe's eyes one last time. Alaric and Caroline find Valerie watching Alaric's wedding video. She's at the part where the Gemini Coven witches are performing their seemingly failed spell against Kai, their little Hail Mary as they lay dying. The two of them ask what's going on, and Alaric's like, oh, I've never been able to watch past this point in the wedding video, you know, past the vows. Assumedly, she sat down to watch it at the part before the chanting starts, and then kept going.
It's her relatives
after
too.
Kai
To be
shows up.
honest, why shouldn't she be able to watch it?
Caroline is like, this is weirdly insensitive, and she tries to get Valerie to turn it off, and Valerie is like, no,
Shut up, I'm doing something.
listening. She's like, I recognize that chant that the Coven members are, you know, saying with their dying breaths. And Valerie reveals that although Kai had thought that the spell was a failed attempt at sending him to another prison world, the spell was actually the Coven trying to save the next generation of Gemini twins. And she says, Alaric, I think your babies might still be alive. And I'm like, oh,
Don't do
that.
this. I knew you were referencing Endgame. Lord, I will never escape that man. Funny enough, his kids were snapped away, so...
Wife and kids gone.
You know?
Later on, Valerie explains that twins are the lifeblood of a Gemini Coven. If a pregnant mother is in danger, then a transfer is their magical failsafe. Caroline's like, this is crazy. And Alaric's like, well, my wife who died months ago just looked me in the eyes and said goodbye. Why couldn't this work? And I'm like, Alaric, you are so willing to just accept. But okay,
What
you know
else
what?
is he gonna do? This woman, this Gemini witch is telling him, hey buddy, your kids can still be alive. Of course he's gonna go, yes. Please tell me how this is possible.
Caroline is like, my guy, I don't want you to get your hopes up.
Yeah.
Okay? And Valerie asks for some of Rick's blood and then dribbles it onto a map of the world. She says Indonesia, the furthest geographical point from Mystic Falls. And she says that if Rick's children are alive, his blood will travel along the map, and once the blood is in proximity of the babies, the map should ignite. Because every spell in this world is lights and wind and fire and blood.
The four elements.
Valerie casts the spell, and the blood trickles across the map, then continues to run all the way off the map and drip onto the floor. And Caroline's like, guys, I don't think the spell is working. I warned you not to get Alaric's hope up. She goes to wipe the blood off the floor with a napkin, and as she touches it, the napkin and the blood suddenly burst into flames. And all three of them jump back in shock as the fire dies. And Alaric's like, what the hell happened? Valerie's stunned, and she's like, it's not possible. And she tells him, your babies are here. And Caroline, who is misinterpreting the relationship between the map and the surface it was on, is like, where? Floating on a raft in the Pacific Ocean? Look at your map, the spell didn't work. And Valerie tells her they're not on the map, they're inside of Caroline.
Oh.
Dum dum dum. So now when we flash forward to 3 years in the future in the next episode, we're like, Caroline's the fiance?
Yep.
Wait,
the fiance,
what?
The kids are hers. She brought them to term and had them with Rick, and then they got engaged. What are we talking about?
It's like, what is happening? Explain yourself, plot. So 3 years in the future, Damon and Rick rush over to the studio where Caroline works and where she's being held hostage. Damon says that he plans to get in, take out the Huntress, Reyna, and rescue Caroline. And Alaric tells him that I did not get a babysitter on such short notice to just sit in the car while you do all the work. And Damon's like, you're not going to sit in the car. You're going to slow Stefan down when he comes to save Caroline, because he obviously also saw this broadcast, by tranquilizing him with vervain so that he can't interfere. Alaric says that, no, if Caroline's in danger, I'm going in with you. And Damon's like, the Huntress doesn't want Caroline, she wants Stefan. And if Stefan goes in there to save her, he's dead. So Damon goes in, but then he's taken down by a very Twilight-esque trap. The old playing the video of someone's voice.
Bella.
So the person
Bella,
thinks
where are you?
Bella, please. It's insane, but that tactic more or less gets used twice in this show in the last 2 seasons.
If it ain't broke, people are stupid enough.
Yeah, he's taken down by some vervain darts, and we go back to the present. Caroline takes a pregnancy test, and she's restless and skeptical, but Alaric is more than willing to believe that it might be possible. And Caroline's like, okay, occult studies professor, have you ever heard anything about a pregnant vampire?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, Caroline, your old flame is also a vampire, and he got someone pregnant, so who's to say?
But she's not the supernatural loophole, so to be fair, it's unusual.
Alaric admits that he has never heard of anything like this, but he points out that until a few weeks ago, he'd never come across anything about a mystic stone that is full of the souls of tormented vampires. So, And Caroline wonders how she's even capable of pregnancy since she's technically dead. And Alaric suggests that since her undead body basically functions like a living person's, as long as she drinks enough blood, with a beating heart and lungs that breathe, it's not that far outside the realm of possibility that her body could support a fetus or two. And I'm like, yeah, the vampires in the Vampire Diaries universe are very alive in the way they function, as opposed to like the Buffyverse where it's like, we don't breathe, we have no pulse, depending on the plot, we have no body heat.
The thing I might push back against, and it's a very soft push because, as we've discussed, biology is not my STEM. The body treats a baby like an infection. Right? That's the thing that we kind of know about pregnancy, is that like the reason your body is doing so much like shifting and changing is to try to get that thing out. And it has a lot of built-in safeguards essentially to make sure that doesn't happen until the baby's fully developed. So how does that interplay with the vampire physiology, in that vampire blood is always working to heal? And I don't know what the answer is to that, because at the end of the day it's magic, so you can kind of decide whatever it is. But there is an argument to be made that it's like that vampire blood would burn through that body. Spoilers for Midnight Mass, when Erin Green unwittingly ingests vampire blood.
So sad. And then everyone treats her like she's crazy, and everyone it was all in her
like she's
head.
an insane person. Her fetus gets reversed. Because again, the body treats the baby like a virus, like a parasite.
I guess already the concept of putting some foreign embryo into another person's womb is already so complex that the Gemini spell might have a way of making sure that that transfer is successful,
right,
and everything is safe and good and functional. And so maybe,
because it's magic,
maybe in a way that allowed the vampire body to also just be like, this is fine.
They said, we've got magic IVF, don't you worry your pretty little head about it, the vampire will be fine. Okay, fair enough.
Caroline wonders why the Gemini Coven would have wanted her to carry Joe and Alaric's twins, and Alaric says, well, I don't think they had a choice. They were all dying, and they couldn't let the future of their coven perish along with them, so they had to put the baby somewhere safe, inside a body that wouldn't die. And I'm like, well, now that's interesting to me, that if Caroline were to get like her neck snapped or something while in this state and then be dead for like an hour while she's regenerating, how would that affect
well,
fetuses?
Equivalently, you're not dead as a vampire when your neck is snapped, you're unconscious. So
okay,
you know,
yeah, that's fair. I guess whatever in her body
it can't be good.
Them,
I'm not saying that
would be fine.
Yeah,
I just know that when your neck is snapped, you have no pulse. We saw that April Young found Caroline in the bathroom with no pulse in season 4, and I'm just like, so there's no circulation, but maybe the vampire blood of it all.
But also those weird little Gemini fetuses. There's something we'll come to learn about them throughout the season that may circumvent that.
Caroline's test turns out to be negative, and Rick is dejected because Valerie seemed so certain. Caroline seems somewhat relieved, which fair.
I don't want to be pregnant at 19. Listen.
I think she's 21 at this point.
Oh,
It's
sure.
season
We've
7.
started jumping in half years. You're right.
Caroline's like, I don't know what Valerie's motives were, but I trust the pregnancy test more than I trust Valerie. And I'm like, Caroline, you're a little bit biased at this point because of all the Stefan and Valerie drama, but...
Oh, yeah. I forgot.
But she apologizes to Rick and she's like, I know how much you wanted this. Matt then calls Caroline and summons her to the Mystic Grill to help with whatever nonsense Julian is up to. I'm not getting into it.
Doesn't matter.
While Caroline is with Matt, she suddenly gets nauseous or nauseated. I forget what the proper grammatical one is.
I've never known.
Because I'm always being told I'm wrong. But she feels woozy and sick and she throws up in a trash bin. Caroline claims that she probably had an expired blood bag for dinner. And I'm like, okay, girl.
All right,
you're
well
reaching,
then.
But sure. When Valerie shows up, expressing concern for Caroline's safety, and reveals to Matt that she believes Caroline to be pregnant. But Caroline denies that she's pregnant, saying, I took a test, bitch, and you were mistaken, so end of story. Bonnie comes into Alaric's office to find him drinking his heartache away, and I'm like, I get it, Rick, I understand.
It's so bad for him.
I think she was there on her own mission, and she's like, oh, no, I can go. And then she's like, actually, I'm going to stick around. And
Yeah.
like, just be there. She asks if he wants to talk, and he's like, nope. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, you know what? That's sometimes what people need. Valerie and Caroline talk outside. Valerie is still concerned for Caroline, only because she believes she's carrying Gemini babies. And Caroline's like, the test was negative. And Valerie says, well, test it again. At the end of the episode, Caroline goes to get an ultrasound, but the doctor tells her that she don't see nothing in that womb, and whoever told her that she was pregnant must have made a mistake. She leaves Caroline and Rick alone in the room, and Rick is disappointed again. And I'm like, please stop doing this to this man.
They keep jerking him around in this episode. It's so sad.
Caroline is like, I'm sorry. And then Rick is like, no, I'm sorry that I put you through all of this.
Yeah.
I've just been so desperate to believe that this was actually possible. Then Valerie comes in, and Caroline smugly tells her that, well, the doctor just told us that you were wrong. So...
Looks like you were wrong again. What's that about? You seem to do that a lot.
Valérie's then like, are you sure about that? And she puts her hand on Caroline's stomach and starts to siphon the magic away from her abdomen. And Caroline's like, what are you doing? Valerie's like, oh, when I cloaked you earlier today, it occurred to me that, oh yeah, cloaking spells are like the Gemini's bread and butter. Mm-hmm. And she is testing a theory, and it turns out she's right. The fetuses were transformed to Caroline's womb, but they were cloaked. And therefore, I guess that includes pregnancy tests, which are testing chemicals in your body.
Being cloaked from perception, ultimately the way we perceive things is that we shoot a bunch of electromagnetic radiation at them, it bounces off, and then it bounces to whatever the thing that's perceiving. So if magic can cloak things from our eyes, then it can cloak things from a scanner.
I guess. I'll allow it.
This
I'm
is
like,
my
chemicals and energy aren't exactly the same thing, but it's fine.
What chemicals are we talking about?
Well, I guess the chemicals in like urine when you're testing for pregnancy versus
you know what? I was only thinking of the ultrasound. Yeah,
I was thinking of the pregnancy.
The pregnancy, the cloaking there. Is it transmuting the urine as it goes out so it doesn't have what's that thing that's in urine when you're pregnant? There's a particular compound.
Either that or the cloaking is extending to the physical pregnancy test itself and hiding that second line.
That's kind of crazy.
With Valerie having siphoned the spell away, the ultrasound now shows that Caroline is indeed pregnant. Next episode, Alaric and Caroline are on their way to a birthing class. She's being her usual, neurotic, hyper-prepared self, and she's got like a bunch of books and pamphlets on pregnancy and birthing. And Alaric jokes that it's a birthing class, not SAT prep. She hands him a pamphlet and she's like, here, this is the least graphic one I could find. And I'm like, no, be a man. Why does he need a non-graphic one? You have agreed to bring his children into the world. Why does he need kitty gloves?
Again, weaponized incompetence era of Alaric Saltzman.
As the class comes to a close, Rick gives her a look and she accuses him of thinking her hormones are driving her crazy because she's pregnant. And she says, that stereotype is just a man's attempt to minimize the gift that women's bodies bring into the world. And then she tells him that she got that quote from A Feminist's Guide to Pregnancy, Chapter 4, page 43.
Hell yeah.
And then Alaric tells her, actually, that quote is from Chapter 3. And Caroline's like, what? Impressive. And Rick is like, oh, what, you think I'm not going to read every book that you're reading? And I'm like, okay, good. The bare minimum, Rick.
The bare No. But also, we really have to take a moment to sit in this dynamic that is now formed now that Caroline is carrying his twins. And I don't know if it's in this episode. It might be a later episode. When
It is. It's in this scene.
episode? Go for it. Go for it.
Caroline, with her vampire ears, overhears some people skinnering, for those of you who aren't South African, that means gossiping, about how Alaric is a professor at Whitmore College, and Caroline must be a student that he's knocked up. So I'm like, the optics aren't great, I'll admit. And given where we end up later this season...
Because obviously, right, this is a situation that has happened against anyone's will. Gemini chicanery has implanted these surrogate kids into her. And so now she's just carrying her professor's babies. I don't know if at this point she's taking any classes that he teaches, but certainly, like, they are professor and student at the same school. I don't know what Caroline's doing.
I don't think she is taking any of his classes because the people who are gossiping in the background say, oh, she must be one of his students. So they know he's a professor, but they don't know exactly who she is. They're just gauging her age. And someone even makes the remark that, what you want to bet that she's doing really well in his class? And I'm like, all right.
I mean, like we said, she's like 21. He's very clearly like pushing 40. It's like, from the outside.
Caroline, who can hear everything these people are saying, tries to stay calm, but she becomes visibly agitated and reveals her vampire eyes. She's like, I'm just going to go over it and explain to them how wrong they are because families come in all shapes and sizes, and this is the 21st century. And Aloric's like, whoa, girl, your face.
You've got your vampire face on.
And Caroline regains control and says, it's just the hormones, before hurrying off.
Oh, Caroline.
Later on, Caroline and Rick share a drink at Rick's place. She's having a blood bag and Rick is having liquor. Caroline admits that she was close to attacking the people who were gossiping about them. And Alaric is like, yeah, well, those people were jerks and they deserved it. And I'm like, oh, look at you being supportive. Caroline suddenly wonders if her drinking blood is okay for the mortal babies in her womb. And she's like, what if blood is like alcohol? What if it's bad for them? And Alaric is like, well, if blood is good for you, how can it be bad for them?
Right.
And Caroline says, well, we don't know because there's no studies or books on this very unique situation that we're in. Then Rick is like, you're doing a great job. Relax. And she turns away and she's like, stop. And Rick continues to try and like, placate her. And he's like, you've made me so happy. And this is a miracle. And you've turned my life around. And she turns around with the vamp face and she's like, I said stop. And she vamp speeds him against the wall.
Right.
Then she regains control of herself and she's like, I'm sorry, I have to go. And she runs off. So in episode 11, Caroline sets up for her baby shower and she tells Stefan that Alaric needs this because he doesn't have the necessary accoutrements for a single father to be. As the baby shower is underway, Caroline and Bonnie watch Matt, Tyler, I guess Tyler just shows up for this episode?
Yeah.
Matt, Tyler, and Alaric play a game where they have to change baby doll's diaper while blindfolded. Caroline expresses concern over Alaric's capabilities as a dad, telling Bonnie that the babies will be born in a few weeks. By now she's popped, so I guess there's been a bit of a...
There's a bit of a jump after the Phoenix, the Phoenix debacle with Stefan and Damon. And also Miss King herself was pregnant in real life, which I think is a big part of the reason they did the story.
Yeah, which was really cool. I like that they worked it in. For something that they seemingly weren't planning at the end of season 6, it really slipped in very seamlessly to the whole Kai and Gemini plot. Kudos to them. Caroline tells Bonnie that she's gonna have to hand over these babies to Rick in a few weeks when they're born, and she says Rick doesn't inspire confidence. However, as the game ends, we see that Alaric is the only one of the 3 men who has managed to change his baby doll's diaper with the blindfold on. Matt's baby's diaper has somehow ended up on its head. And Tyler's baby has completely lost its head.
Nice.
Alaric pulls his blindfold off and sees Tyler's headless doll, and he's like, that's terrifying.
You will not be babysitting.
Then he looks at Matt and he's like, neither are you. Ever. Caroline is pleasantly surprised at Rick's diaper changing prowess and asks how he did that. And Alaric is like, it was just a diaper.
It's just a diaper. At this point, you're sort of like, Caroline, maybe you're being a bit unfair. It's kind of crazy to be surprised by this. You're enforcing the issue.
And then Caroline's like, okay, I get it. I'm the overprotective, no fun surrogate.
Oh.
And then Alaric's like, no. You are an incredibly generous friend to whom I will forever be indebted. And Caroline says it's not about debt, as long as he understands that once the twins are born, she will not be on call 24/7 to burp and bathe and feed and diaper change, etc. And Alaric tells her that he doesn't expect that to be her problem.
Yeah.
And then Caroline's like, well, it isn't a problem. And I'm like, Caroline, what's going on here? You seem a bit conflicted about something.
You seem to be arguing, but no one's arguing with you.
Before Caroline can say more, she feels one of the babies kicking. Alaric puts his hand on her belly to feel, and Caroline tells him that, oh, now the other baby is kicking too. And Rick is like, you can tell them apart? And she's like, yeah, of course. I was like, oh, all right. She's mother. As the gays say.
She's your mother.
I was about to say,
her.
as Meghan Trainor interprets the meaning.
The genuine meaning of the word mother.
That night, as Caroline unpacks all of the baby shower gifts in Alaric's office, she stumbles upon a letter on Rick's desk, and the letter reveals that he has been offered a job out of town. Rick comes in, and as Caroline starts to prattle on about all the things they still have to prepare before the babies are born, Rick is like, I can sense something is going on. What's the deal? And then she's like, okay, when were you going to tell me that you were planning to leave? And Rick is like, when I officially got the job. And Caroline's like, what's wrong with the job you have now? And Alaric is like, nothing's wrong with the job, it's the place.
Yeah.
Then he tells her, I am not raising my kids anywhere near Mystic Falls.
Right.
Or Whitmore College. Or vampires in general.
I was gonna leave before my wife was brutally murdered at the altar. I was getting my family out of here.
When he says the vampire part, Caroline looks a little sad. Rick notices and apologizes, and he's like, look, I thought all the preparation that we've been doing was for a single parent. I was under the impression that once the babies were born, you weren't going to be involved. And then Caroline's like, no, I won't be, because they're not mine. They're yours and Joe's. And it's like, Caroline. Caroline then says that she agrees with Alaric's plan. It is safest for him and the babies to get as far away from here as they can. Because it's TV and childbirth can never just be a predictable, by the numbers process. In episode 13, Caroline's birth is incredibly dramatic. She needs to have a C-section because these babies, as it turns out, are siphons, not just witches. And they are siphoning off the magic of her vampirism from the inside out and causing her to desiccate the way that a vampire would if it didn't feed or if it was staked. Stefan calls Alaric and explains the situations with the twins' birth, because it turns out that even though the doctors are trying to cut them out, they are telekinetically magically stopping it. They don't want to be born because they are comfortable in Caroline's body with the steady supply of magic that vampirism is supplying them.
They said we got food, we got a comfy little playpen, we're out here swimming in amniotic fluid. Why would we ever want to leave? The party's endless.
Thankfully, Stefan and Valerie have enlisted the help of the remaining heretics to create a field of enough magical power outside of Caroline to draw the twins outside. Rita Cruz gets her sword back and comes after Bo, who is marked by her. Nora and Mary Lou flee with Bo, while Valerie stays behind to finish the job. Bonnie shows up later and is able to help Valerie. Damon fights Raina to keep her away from everybody else while this is happening. Then Alaric turns up.
This whole time he's been driving from somewhere else. I don't even remember where he was.
I don't even know where he was.
And they're like, dude, your kids are being birthed. Stefan's been there handling everything, and Rick is just elsewhere.
Once Stefan goes off to fight Raina and save Damon, as he always does, he gets stabbed by Raina, mocked by her sword, and lures her away. Alaric's babies are successfully born, and they're both girls. As we would have predicted from the flash forward.
Right.
As Caroline weeps over Stefan having to flee, there is a nice moment as Alaric comes in and shows her the babies that she gave birth to. He gives one baby to her to hold and tells her that the baby has been named Josette for her biological mother.
Josette Jr., as he always intended.
Yes, he got there in the end. He then presents Caroline with the other baby and tells her that this one has been named Elizabeth for Caroline's mother.
God.
And I was like, oh my gosh, you sweetheart, don't make me cry.
To go, here's what I think of what you have done for me in this moment and over this year. Like, you have given me my joy and my life back. I'm naming one of these kids after your mom who very recently passed away, so the memory of her can live on. It's just so insanely sweet. And in another context, right? On an island.
On an island?
This trope where two people are put in the position of having to care for a child and are like maybe platonic, maybe strangers, maybe do not like each other at all, but through like this responsibility that they now share have to like stumble their way into figuring it out, and through that they start gaining like camaraderie and friendship, and then that friendship develops into something else because this becomes this family unit, right? And it's unavoidable that there is an intimacy to that. There is like this insular bubble that happens because you are parents to this child, and anyone outside of that may view this unit kind of strangely, but it's like they don't understand what we've got going on in here. And that's a trope I like. It's just you know, it's a little bit
Yeah.
considering that it's these two characters.
And especially, I mean, obviously, Candace King, love her. She is a mere mortal. So in real life, she
She's
had visibly aged
fully an
from
adult.
2009,
Right.
when the show started. But in universe, this is meant to be a physically 17-year-old girl.
That's the other bit too, right? Is that like physically she's 17, mentally she's 21. As an actress, she's like in her 30s. She's not very far away from Matt Davis in age. So like it shouldn't be weird.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you're someone who jumps into the vampire thing fully no issue and are like, this is fine. But the thing is, he's not the vampire in this situation. She is. So it's not like, oh, he's this older vampire, but like also it's okay because you expect that of a vampire story. She's the vampire and she's frozen at 17. And he's like 39.
And it's like, damn, no wonder they're gossiping about you.
Exactly. And then even if you pull out from that, right, because it's like, there will be people who don't care about that, and fair enough. You know, age gap, romance, blah, blah, blah. Who cares about that discourse? It's also like, Rick and Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, I can, as we go through this season, I continue to shade it constantly in my notes, because there's something I say at the very end of season 7. I saved it just for you. I hope you'll like it.
Okay. Okay. And I guess maybe that is the narrative, right? It's like Rick and Caroline ? Which really makes me wonder. It's like, I wonder who floated this in the writer's room to be like, see where it goes. Let's test it out. And then if it doesn't work out, that's fine. But like, maybe people will be into this. Did they think people would be into it? I don't know.
It's the CW, so you always have to wonder what their intentions were.
It's a sort of show that just kind of like throws spaghetti at the wall and is like, let's see how they feel about it, and then like pull the rest off and let the one stick. We were maybe floating Elena and Elijah for a second. We maybe are floating Matt and Bonnie for one episode in this season.
Matt and April Young.
Right, Matt and April were young. That went nowhere because they couldn't
ship
find
that
something
never
for
set
April
sail.
to do. It's like they, for whatever reason, they were like, this is the one we want to try out at least somewhat. And maybe it's just because it's an obstacle for Steroline.
That is
right?
the main thing, I assume.
Yeah.
But I will comment on it at the end.
Yeah. Let me.
Because even in that vein, I had something to say.
I'll reserve my comments then, but I just wanted to throw it out there that I'm like, in another context, I would really love this because I like this trope.
Spoilers for anyone who wants to watch Godzilla -1.
Okay.
That trope does exist in that movie.
Oh,
For what
cute.
it's worth. It's really cute.
There's a movie called Life as We Know It that has Josh Duhamel and Katherine Heigl, and I like that.
Alaric speaks to Caroline in her hospital bed. He tells her that he is leaving immediately for Dallas that very same day and taking the girls with him. And Caroline's like, but we haven't yet worked out all the various logistics of your move. And Rick is like, I don't care. Everything changed after he saw his daughter's little faces for the first time yesterday. Caroline is like, is this about Raina? Because Raina's gone off to chase Stefan, much to my dismay, so you don't have to worry about that. And Alaric is like, no, this is actually about Joe and the promise that I made to her that we were going to leave town as soon as we were married. We all know how that turned out, so I'm not making the same mistake twice. Certainly not with these kids. And I'm like, I want to give a gold, platinum, diamond, whatever you want to call it, medal to Alaric Saltzman for being the first character in this show to say, I am leaving before something bad happens.
Truly
I'm not
the
going to stay
first.
here. I've got my car seat. Caroline's even like, you're not prepared to travel with newborns. And Rick is like, I've hired a nurse from this hospital. I'm ready
Efficient.
to leave.
Plan is serious.
But Caroline volunteers herself as a better traveling companion and child caregiver. She like drags the nurse and she's like, oh, that one, she's so incompetent, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this will become a recurring thing for Caroline when it comes to these kids, that nobody else is good enough.
Truly, Caroline is not a girl's girl, and that's okay. That's fine. In certain contexts only. And you know what? All right, we can't all be.
So Alaric and Caroline travel with the twins, stop at a diner for a bit, and Caroline wants to discuss the short list of potential nannies that she has compiled for Alaric. The babies start crying, and Alaric takes Elizabeth for a walk while Caroline stays with Josette and tries to calm her. That night, Caroline and Alaric have finally arrived in the new Saltzman household in Texas, and Caroline is still spearheading all the logistics of Rick's move. You know, she's doing Caroline things. She's like, oh, I've called the electrician. You know, the furniture will be here, you know, later on in the week.
I've made the Gantt chart of how this is all gonna go down.
I've analyzed all these potential nannies because, you know, you want someone who's like going to be serious about this job, but not too ambitious that they might like, you know, up and leave one day and then leave you high and dry. And it's like, whoa, okay, Caroline. It's almost like you're trying to convince yourself of something.
I love that she got in that car and went with him to Texas, telling herself, I guess, in her head and him that like, yeah, I'm just helping you move and then I'm gonna be hands off once I've given you all the It's like, girl, and you took that assumedly 8 to 10 hour drive or more. Texas is very big. And you're just like, yeah, I'm just casually helping you move to Texas and nothing more.
As a friend, she said. She even offers to compel Alaric's nanny to get her to lower the fee. And Rick is like, no, that's not necessary. You know, you helped me score this house and, you know, you actually gave birth to my kids, so you have gone above and beyond.
Right.
So now, having put the babies down for the night, Caroline's like, you know, I could just stay the night, you know, in case you need my help tomorrow, if that's okay with you. And Alaric's like, yeah, that's fine. You can stay as long as you want. And I'm like, and how? The next episode, just really quick, Alaric and Caroline are like continuing to care for the newborns. It's cute watching them like start to sync up and like get into a rhythm.
Yeah.
They're not perfect at it, but they're doing a good job. Because who is perfect? Not even Caroline Forbes.
She tries her damn best, though, and that's what matters.
When Stefan asks her to come see him while he's like continuing to be on the run, Caroline expresses reluctance to leave Rick and the kids, and it's like, priorities starting to shift.
Yeah.
And she's like, Alaric still needs my help here in Dallas. And I'm like, yeah, that's why you're staying, because Alaric needs your help. Sure. At the end of that episode, Alaric is sent a letter by Damon, who tells him of his plan to shut himself in a coffin and desiccate until Elena wakes up. And Stefan, who is being kind of weird, has like come over to the Saltzman house without telling anybody, and he's like watching Alaric and Caroline in their moment of shared parenthood through the window.
It is. I'm not disputing it.
It's the reverse of that SpongeBob meme with Squidward looking out the window
down.
while SpongeBob and Patrick are like downside having the time of their lives. By episode 17, we are now fully 3 years in the future. So no more flash forwards. This is just the current timeline now. 3 years in the future, which is now our present.
Yeah.
Matt calls Alaric to tell him that something bad has happened and he has sent someone to Alaric for assistance. Alaric is furious that Matt was working with Raina, who kidnapped Caroline. And Matt is like, Caroline was just the bait. Oh my gosh. How many times did I have to explain myself?
She just got shot up with a couple steaks and vervain. Like, I don't get what the big deal is. Like, Matt, it's crazy no one's killed you this season. It's crazy.
Rick is still very angry that Matt drew his family back into this supernatural drama.
Right.
He's like, me and Caroline have been out of this Mystic Falls gang danger and drama for 3 years now.
And now you're sending someone to my house where my kids live? I'll kill you.
He says we have kids and we're getting married in a month. And I'm like, oh, there it is. You said it out loud.
It was. I had
and I'm like, all right, Alaric, what's happening here? But Valerie shows up with an unconscious Raina Cruz in tow, and she tells Rick that the shattered Phoenix Stone has scattered various vampire souls all over the country, some in vampire corpses and some in human corpses. Raina awakens and tells them that they have to hunt down and kill the vampires who were released from the stone, as they are terrible evildoers. Alaric calls Damon to warn him that the quote-unquote Stefan that he is with is an imposter. A random vampire soul from the Phoenix Stone. And he tells them that they need to find the real Stefan fast, because if he is in a human body, the body will start to break down after about 3 days, just like Fojo's did. Or Jones.
Jones, my queen, my icon.
Alaric is able to help Raina and Valerie locate Stefan. Raina eventually escapes, though, and knocks Valerie out. Rick considers trying to stop her with his dart gun.
He considers
but his
it
sense
a
of self-preservation has increased in his fatherhood, and he ultimately decides to let her go peacefully. And I'm like, Rick, I understand.
Yeah.
You are now in that era of it's not just my life on the line.
Exactly.
If I die, I orphan someone. This episode is mainly about Valerie and Alaric feeling some type of way about Steroline.
Yeah, which is...
From Valerie's end, I'm like, I get it. From Alaric's end, I'm like, oh my God. So, Valerie accuses Rick of rooting for Stefan's demise so that he will have less competition for Caroline's heart.
Which, fair enough.
Valerie says that while she never believed she and Stefan would last, Alaric has put a ring on it, quote unquote. And Alaric tells Valerie, see, now he says something here that he will later on contradict, which is why I noted it. He proposed to Caroline because he fell in love with her, which, ew! And that Caroline, for her part, said yes because it made sense for the kids.
Yeah.
He admits that Stefan coming back might ruin his perfect life. Valerie tells Rick that for what it's worth, she's rooting for him and Caroline.
Insane.
In brackets here, I literally have, ugh. Brother, ugh.
Again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm the weird moralistic, like, high and mighty person being like, this could never happen. It's just odd. You know, he was her high school teacher. It's a little bit weird.
You met her when she was in grade 11. You were on the Founders Council with her mom. You graded her papers and her book reports.
Siblings, you must understand. You must accept it's just a little bit weird.
At the end of that episode, Alaric figures out that the vampire inhabiting Stefan's body is a serial killing vampire from the 1980s.
Ambrosia!
Yes, who used to stalk college campuses. Apparently, the killer used to compel his human victims to murder each other. Episode 18, one way or another. Alaric teams up with Damon to help him save Stefan. Damon asks where Valerie is, and Rick is like, oh, she's currently at a motel prepping the spell to return Stefan to his body. And he tells Damon that Valerie did manage to do a locator spell on Stefan's body, and that the vampire inhabiting it is named Ambrose. Damon thanks Rick for helping, but Rick tells him that he didn't exactly volunteer. Valerie ambushed him. And Damon quips that Valerie probably figured that Alaric would feel good about stepping up to help an old friend, especially since he's marrying said friend's ex.
Eating it up.
Oh.
Eating it up, Damon.
Alaric suggests that Damon might want to spend these last hours saying goodbye to Stefan, who is in some human body.
Oh.
Marty, I think the man's name is.
Marty.
And is slowly,
What
dying.
a tragedy.
Rather than wasting time hunting Ambrose down, as per his experience with Faux Joe. Stefan doesn't have a lot of time, is what Rick is trying to tell him. Damon rejects this idea and says, why would I spend time with my dying brother when I could be performing a Hail Mary? Which I'm like, you know what? It works so well for this group to do Hail Marys that I'm on Damon's side this one time.
Yeah, you know that they're going to do some crazy shit that's going to actually save the day, so might as well.
So he and his freshly unboxed, semi-retired sidekick go off. It's like Damon is lugging Rick around this episode. It's like, just like old time. And Rick's
like, I absolutely don't want to be here.
As they drive, Damon, who has been newly awakened after his desiccation nap, fishes for info on where Bonnie is and what she's been up to in the last 3 years. Rick suggests that Damon talk to Bonnie himself because he wants details of her life and Rick doesn't want to get involved. And I'm like, throwback to when you were like, I'm not getting involved in your guys' Phoenix Stone drama.
Said sort your own shit out. And you know what? In this situation, he's the good guy for doing that. He's not an asshole for not looking out for Bonnie,
yes.
who is suffering. You're the one who sucks in this situation again. For context, Damon put himself in a coffin for 3 years and left letters for them. You said it about Rick. He also left a letter for Bonnie and didn't tell her he was disappearing. These are his best friends.
Did he leave one for Enzo just out of curiosity?
Yo, you know he didn't leave one for... Who's Enzo? Who's that?
Shame.
Come on
Oh,
now.
Enzo. Oh, well... Damon says he doesn't know where Bonnie is, but he jokes that he and Caroline can discuss Bonnie at the wedding reception. Then Alaric's like, actually, Caroline and I are not having a big wedding, just a few friends. Damon is surprised that Alaric has friends besides him. In brackets, I'm like, which is fair. The man's bachelor party last season was mainly his former high school students. Damon was the only person there who wasn't a college kid.
That's true. But also, in Rick's defense, that was when he was trapped in the hell loop of Mystic Falls. Once you leave the context of that insane town, you can start to be a normal person who makes normal friends your own age.
That is well and true. Yes, Alaric does say that he and Caroline have made new friends. And he's like, Damon, it's been 3 years. People change. She keeps trying to get Damon to drop him off so that he can be excluded from all of this nonsense.
Right.
But Damon refuses.
God.
And Damon acknowledges that saying goodbye to Rick in the letter was wrong and apologizes in his usual glib way. Alaric tells Damon that he's not really interested in being part of Damon's redemption tour. And Damon asks Rick for one last mission for old time's sake. And I'm like, what movie do you think you're in, Damon?
He's like,
one last ride.
Exactly. He thinks he's in Expendables and they're going back for one last mission. No, this man has kids. He's trying to get home to his children.
He says saving Stefan will be more fun than putting together broken up baby dolls. And I'm like, all right, mind your business. Alaric tells him that he isn't the biggest fan of Stefan either right now because he ghosted Caroline while he was on the run from Raina Cruz and broke her heart.
Hurt her pretty badly.
Damon's like, well, Stefan abandoning Caroline seemingly worked out pretty well for you, Rick. Damon is able to convince Rick to help by asking, do you really think Caroline doesn't care whether Stefan lives or dies?
Yeah.
They get to the frat house where Ambrose, inside Stefan, is. Damon can't enter the house because, human dwelling. So as usual, his human sidekick has to go in for him.
Yeah.
He says that he's even gotten Rick a disguise and he hands him like a college sweater from like campus or something, like some merch from the university. And he jokes that, hey, you can go as the creepy college professor pretending to chaperone.
Oh. Boy.
And I was like, given where we are in the plot.
Honestly, the energies are converging and convalescing, and I'd like to exit them.
And I'm like, look how far we've fallen. In season 6, Joe and Rick were constantly like, yeah, let's stay away from these college kids. We're too
Get
old
out
to
of
be
this shit.
Alaric still wants to go home to his family, and Damon says he's not fooling anybody. He reminds him that he pointed a rifle at Damon when Damon showed up at his house. And he's like, this is proof you're still in the game. And Alaric tells Damon, I'm not in the game just because I possess the means to protect my family from some uninvited lurker.
I live in a stand your ground state. I don't know if you knew that. He said, I'm speaking through my character, and you should stand your ground and shoot whatever suspicious figures are hanging around your home. Whatever lurking shadows are darkening your doorstep.
Damon says, okay, Rick, if you're not going to do it for me, at least do it for Stefan, who stepped aside and made this perfect, happy life possible for you. The life you're dying to get back to. Alaric and Damon show up at the college house and find almost everyone dead, like the last person to perform the last kill under compulsion, walks out. And Ambrose is not there and has ditched the phone that he was using to call Damon. Alaric suggests that Ambrose may have overheard Damon talking about where Stefan, in human Marty's body, is, and that he may have gone after Stefan to kill him and remove the need for them pursuing Ambrose at all. So Damon and Alaric show up in time to save Stefan Marty from Ambrose Stefan. Alaric tranks him with a vervain dart, and Damon gives a satisfied smirk and is like, yeah, okay, maybe he was right. And Alaric is like, I hate how good that felt.
Yeah.
As Valerie prepares to place Stefan back in his right body, she thanks Alaric for helping them. Once she starts the spell, she begins to become overwhelmed, though. Fainting and nosebleeds ensue. Damon pushes her to continue, but Alaric is like, no, stop, she's not strong enough. Damon insists that Valerie will not let Stefan die, and he rouses her to finish the spell, and she's ultimately successful.
Yeah.
At the end of the episode, Alaric hurries off, and Damon chases after him and is like, where are you going?
Home!
And Rick is like, where I've wanted to go all day. Home! I have been telling you.
Do you know that meme of that dancing guy? And they're like, the party ended an hour ago and he's still here.
And this time Damon apologizes properly, telling Rick that he shouldn't have abandoned him. It was a terrible thing to do. And he asks Rick what he can do to make amends so that things can go back to the way they were. And Alaric is like,
it's not how it works.
Have you not been listening? The reason the last 3 years have been the happiest of my life is because I got to start over. I have 2 little girls that I love, a job that I actually earned, and a fiance that makes me feel lucky to be alive. I have all of this without you barging into my life and screwing it up. I don't want things to go back to the way they were.
Yeah.
Let me spell it out for you.
Honestly real.
Damon is hurt, but he thanks Rick for being honest. And as Rick is about to leave, he tells Damon where Bonnie is and says, you might have more luck winning her back. But I wash my hands of this nonsense.
Yeah.
Next episode. Oh, here it is. Stefan shows up on Alaric's doorstep. Alaric immediately tells him that he can't be part of any escapades today. And Stefan's like, no, there's no escapades. Thank you for your assistance saving my life yesterday. I just want to speak to Caroline. And Alaric's like, well, she's not here, but I guess you can come inside and talk. Let me be civil. And Stefan is like complimenting the home that Rick and Care have built.
This whole dynamic is so bizarre, and I don't know why he didn't just come back later. And I don't know why Rick invited him in. I don't know why anyone's doing anything that they're doing in this scene. I don't know if it's just masculine posturing that I don't understand. It's just all so
possibly.
strange.
I mean, Rick has been known to do that. Stefan, I guess, is just so desperate to see Caroline after 3 years.
It's just like, come back when she's back. Are you just gonna wait here for hours? Wait down the block.
So awkward.
Wait down the block. It's no weirder than you're already being.
I'm also surprised that Alaric even invited him in. I'm like,
right.
Already starting to compromise this home by giving these flip-floppy emotional switch vampires access to your house. Stefan spots a calendar with a date marked on it that is labeled Justice of the Peace. Rick notices Stefan looking at it and seems to get uncomfortable. In brackets, I'm like, yeah, we all are, Mr. Saltzman. And then he suggests they go out for a drink. So I guess they're going to continue to be awkward, Sandile.
Why do they go for a drink?
At a bar, which is not the Mystic Grill, Stefan ignores Damon's calls. Alaric asks Stefan why he ghosted Caroline even after Raina was locked up, because we have to remember that during these 3 years, Raina was in the armory.
And Stefan and Valley were just living it up. I mean, they were looking for a way to get rid of the mark, but they weren't looking that hard.
Valerie certainly wasn't. Stefan is just like, no, there's more to the story. And Alaric points out that he didn't communicate any of these details at the time and accuses Stefan of having a sudden renewed interest in Caroline only because she's built a new life and is about to be married. Rick continues to be bitter on Caroline's behalf, but eventually he tells Stefan to answer Damon's calls because Damon is like ringing them incessantly. Damon needs help crossing Phoenix Stone vampires off Raina's list, so Stefan and Alaric decide to help, even though Stefan promised there would be no escapades today. That didn't last long.
To be fair, Stefan didn't initiate these. Damon was asking them in tandem.
Later on, Stefan and Alaric bury some dead vampire bodies that they've slain. Alaric says that this is the part he doesn't miss. Stefan reminds him that all of this was for Bonnie. Alaric cautions Stefan against trying to get the Mystic Falls gang back together, and he says that this temporary alliance does not make them friends, nor does it earn Stefan a place back in Caroline's life. Then Stefan is like, well, I think that's a choice Caroline has to make for herself.
Which, listen.
In brackets, I have. Exactly. Stop being weird, Rick. This is so weird, and I need this season to end now. Please.
But also, not to defend Rick and his weird relationship, but also for Stefan to come back and try to be all haughty to Caroline's fiance. We may not like it, but that man is now her family. That man's job is now to protect her. And he's going, you broke her heart. You ran gallivanting for 3 years and now you just want to come back and upset her? I don't appreciate that. So, listen, he may be technically right, but Stefan, shut your mouth.
I do like how protective of Caroline Alaric is in this era where Stefan is trying to win her back and he's like bitter on her behalf. I can appreciate that. I would have appreciated a lot more if it wasn't colored with shades of romantic jealousy and it was just like, no, this is my partner in parentage who is just a friend and you hurt her, someone that I respect and love platonically, and that's why I'm angry at you.
Sure. That's perfectly fair.
Alaric tells Stefan a very sad story about how when they moved to Dallas, Caroline joined a book club.
Yeah.
She would go once a week, then twice a week. Then she started coming home later and later. And eventually Alaric followed her one night. Stefan is like, that's healthy. I have to agree with the shade, but I guess if you thought something strange was going on with the vampiric surrogate mother of your babies who's currently living under your roof and has access to your children,
I need to make sure everything's fine.
So Rick followed her and found out that there was no book club. Caroline would drive her car down to the river, park there, and just sit inside it and cry alone. And then Rick says, but then something happened. Caroline stopped making excuses to be somewhere else, and he and the twins stopped being a placeholder, and they became her life. And Stefan's like, oh, so you know her pretty well? And Alaric's like, better than anyone now.
You know what I'm saying? Stefan with the snarky commentary. You don't get to do that. You do not get to throw in snarky remarks at this moment. God.
And Alaric tells Stefan, Caroline doesn't want to see you. And then Stefan's like, okay, you know what? I've been nice. Let me tell you something, Rick. I saw 2 separate bedrooms for you and Caroline in your house. I wrote, when? Weren't you downstairs with Rick the entire time?
Right.
I know you have super speed, but I don't think Rick would have appreciated or permitted you vamp speeding off to snoop around his house. So I have no idea when Stefan saw these rooms. Stefan also says that I saw your appointment with the Justice of the Peace. That doesn't seem very Caroline Forbes to me.
So, I never understood that, and for some reason in the years since I've seen it, I've never once Googled it. I was thinking about it for 10 minutes now, and I still haven't Googled it, so please tell me, what is a Justice of the Peace?
I assume it's whatever judge performs courtroom weddings. Like, sign a legal document, you are now married on paper, we don't need a ceremony or a reception.
Oh, I see. So it would
Which
suggest
is why
a
Stefan
court
says
wedding
that
versus
doesn't
like a
seem
big...
very Caroline.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to like an efficient and extravaganza.
Yeah, exactly. Because Miss Party Planning, high school dance committee, mapped out her ex-boyfriend's entire college freshman year, is definitely not going to do a courtroom wedding if she's actually in love and happy.
That's rough. Also, I lie. As it turns out, I did Google Justice of the Peace at some point because I Googled it now, and the first link is purple. So clearly, I learned it at some point and then forgot.
Your evil alter ego did it. So Stefan says, so tell me, after you get home from City Hall on Friday, is that when she's gonna start sleeping in your bed? Burn!
So crazy!
Alaric tells Stefan that this is none of his business.
Right.
And Stefan's like, you can make your relationship with Caroline look good on paper, but deep down, you know it's a lie. Then Alaric headbutts him.
Real.
So I guess people don't really change as much in the span of 3 years as he would have us believe.
No, I'm gonna do something crazy, and I'm gonna stand on Rick's side for this episode because listen, he was being so cordial the whole day. The whole day. He took this man out for a drink, trying to outline to him the reasons why it is a bad idea to be coming back here now, when his fiance, Stefan's ex-girlfriend, whose heart he broke, whose life he ruined, is now content at the very least in the life she's living. For Stefan to be here snarking and speaking out the side of his mouth and just truly, and I don't want to play into the stereotypes of masculinity, but at the end of the day, these are 2 certain types of men. To come here and question this man's relationship and question the nature of his household and expect to not get slapped in the face is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. So Rick is absolutely free to headbutt that man. On top of that, he's a vampire. What damage is he going to do? Just to show him what he deserves in that moment. Because Stefan, you was doing too much. Way too much.
It is quite disrespectful that canonically, somewhere in between the time that Alaric invited Stefan into his home
right,
and then left with
you
him, Stefan went snooping around and was like, a different bedroom, I see.
And you're gonna sit here like Lady Whistle Down, like freaking A from Pretty Little Liars, like Gossip Girl, and be like, seems like the Forbes Saltzmans aren't as copacetic as we might have thought. XOXO. No, bitch, you don't get to do that. Insane.
Alaric says he knows Caroline doesn't love him, but that their life together is not a lie. All I can do is be worthy of her, Stefan, which is what you've never been. And I'm like, oh snap! Oh damn!
Get him again.
And then he walks away. I wrote, I still don't know what to make of this dynamic. It is weird and I am tired.
Weird as hell. Never wanted to be in it. Happy to be leaving it.
At the end of the night, Alaric returns home and Stefan shows up right behind him wanting to talk civilly. So I guess good for you, Stefan. Okay. However, Caroline and the girls have come back at this point, so it's super awkward when all 3 of them run into each other. Alaric offers to put the girls to bed if Caroline wants to speak to Stefan, but Caroline's like, no, that's fine. I'll do it. She tells Rick she's happy to be home. She kisses him on the cheek and then walks away from Stefan without a word.
Finish.
And Alaric closes the door on that man.
So now what? Here all day, talking shit.
How much do you want to bet that kiss on the cheek was the first time she's ever done that and she was doing it just for Stefan?
I don't want to think about what the nature of their relationship is. The thing is, up until this episode, or maybe up until the discussion that he and Valerie were having, I I had just taken it on good faith that they genuinely, they had 2 babies, they fell in love, they're getting married. It's a little bit like, again, untraditional situation, strange situation, but that's what we're being presented, and so that's it. I would not have assumed otherwise until this point. So, I'm not going to go into further detail than that. That's all I'll say.
I guess that's also what I thought might be happening when I first watched the show. I thought that, marriage of convenience, also she's on the rebound, but there is a genuine romantic interest there from both sides.
Sure.
To then learn that it is one-sided, but they're still getting married, deeply confused me, and I still don't know what Caroline was thinking.
I mean,
we can analyze her in her
own thing. Yeah, we'll get to that.
I think I've mentioned it before, and maybe I held it off until we got to an Alaric episode, but we can talk about it now. In the books, there is a character who Meredith Fell is based on called Meredith Sules. As far as I can tell, Sules is not a real surname. Mm-hmm. But this character, rather than the Caroline Forbes of the book, is Elena Gilbert's other girl bestie. It's Bonnie McCullough and Meredith Sules. Mm-hmm. And in the books, as we go into the college years, it is Meredith Sules who becomes romantically linked to Mr. Saltzman, who is still their history teacher in the books. Yeah. He might not be much older than them in the books. He might be in his 20s. Mm-hmm. But he's still their teacher. Yeah. And then he goes off to Whitmore College and becomes their professor and starts a relationship with Meredith, who's a student. And it's still kind of... And I don't know whether that is what inspired this weird little arc.
I would assume it all got mixed in. It's actually crazy how many roads led to this story. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe because I was like, why would they try this one out? And maybe it was like, well, damn, this is all we can kind of do. It's the thing that makes the most
Caroline
sense.
is spiritually Meredith from the books in the role she fulfills friendship-wise. So I guess
it so follows.
Let's try it and see what happens. I don't know.
I love the counterbalance of Rick is younger, but in this incarnation, he is directly her professor, as opposed to just the professor at her school.
And it's still so weird because it's like, as we see it, Caroline is not, she doesn't have feelings for Rick.
No.
This for her is like some sort of a political marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. She's uniting the houses of Forbes and Saltzman for the good of their progeny, for the next generation, to keep hold of the crown.
Episode 20. Alaric prepares to go help the Mystic Falls gang cross off more Phoenix Stone's escapees from Raina's list. Caroline, who has organized and packed all of his weapons, insists on going with him, but Rick is like, no, it's too dangerous. Caroline says, yeah, it's more dangerous for you than me. I'm the vampire. You're a human. Raina sends Rick and Caroline after a vampire couple named Ashlyn and Wyatt. Caroline tells Rick that Raina has informed them the couple is currently having sex because Raina's having all these visions of these vampires she's linked to. Alaric quips that hopefully the afterglow will distract the couple when he and Caroline arrive to take them out.
Nice.
And Caroline laughs. And Rick asks if he should feel guilty about this, killing these lovers. And Caroline's like, no, we're doing Ashlyn and Wyatt a favor. Let them go out on a high note. Rip out their hearts before they inevitably do it to each other. And it's like, oh, okay, damn. Someone is still bitter about Sterolite.
I also love that this conversation about the mind-blowing sex these vampires are having, the unsaid thing is the lack of mind-blowing sex that this couple's having.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Send that for a bit.
Caroline tries to be cavalier, but Rick tells her that outlook is pretty bleak, and he asks how she's doing, and she's like, I'm fine. And then Rick says, it's okay if you want to talk about Stefan. We don't have to pretend he doesn't exist, especially when, he's like showing up on our doorstep lately. And then Caroline says, I didn't have anything to say to Stefan last night, and I don't have anything to say about him now. And that's that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Caroline and Rick show up to slay Ashlyn and Wyatt. They find them in a tattoo parlor. Ashlyn is tattooing Ash on Wyatt's arm. Caroline pretends that she and Rick are getting married this weekend and are interested in his and hers tattoos. I mean, they are getting married, but I don't know. Is it that weekend? The tattoo part is definitely a ruse.
We're eloping, actually. We're moving the date up.
They then attack with two vampires. Ashlyn dodges Rick's gunfire and vamp speeds away, abandoning Wyatt. So I guess Caroline was right.
True love. True love.
I love that song.
It's good.
Caroline and Rick take Wyatt down. Ashton almost gets away, but some armory dudes show up and kill her. They then tell Alaric, whom they address as Mr. Saltzman,
Cute.
like, Caroline, almost like what you used to call him, that he needs to come with them. Caroline and Rick arrive at the armory, and Rick geeks out over all the historical artifacts that are there. Caroline is worried that something might happen to both of them and is desperate to get home to the girls, and Alaric tries to tell her everything will be fine. But he admits that if the armory has the means to make all of these precious, mysterious, fabled artifacts disappear, then they can certainly make the two of them disappear.
Yeah.
So he's just praying that someone is able to give the armory whatever it is they want.
I do love that he's just so busy being all googly-eyed at all the trinkets and gizmos, and it's like, oh, Indiana Jones is waking up a little bit.
Yes, Caroline actually has a line about that later on.
Yes, even if he only slightly missed the actual fight, he very much missed the history and the archaeology and the anthropology, the folklore of all of it. The learned side of him also missed getting back into this action.
It's his passion. Isabel did say, you're a history teacher now. That makes sense. It's good for you.
It's good for you.
Well, it turns out the armory wants Bonnie to open up their little siren vault for boring season 8 reasons that we won't get into now. She does so, and Alex St. John, the head of the armory at that point, allows her to leave with Rick and Caroline. Bonnie double-crosses Alex, however, by sealing her and her goons inside the armory building once she and her loved ones are safely outside. At the end of the day, Alaric and Caroline talk about more Steroline drama, and Caroline insists she wants nothing to do with Stefan, but Alaric is like, listen girl, if there is even the smallest chance that you might get back together with Stefan, then I want to know now before I marry you.
Right.
And he says he wants to be her loyal, committed partner and that he wants their little family to work, but he doesn't want it if she'd rather be with someone else. I'm so confused. Last episode, you said you knew she didn't love you and you were fine with that. Now suddenly you want a real committed relationship and you feel threatened by Stefan. Girl, make up your mind.
Jumping into defense attorney position again. He said
Oh my God.
watched... I hate doing it. I want to be clear. I don't enjoy being here. I'm mandated by the state of the It Was an Animal Attack court.
Public defender.
He did say, I want to be a loyal and committed partner. He did not say relationship. So he is speaking only from his end if we're taking his words to be his words.
And I'm like, loyal in what way? Because if you're not looking for a relationship, why can't she be interested in Stefan?
I don't think the implication is that you can't be interested in Stefan. The implication is if this is going to be a thing that hinders us from being this married couple taking care of these kids.
I guess.
I don't know what to tell you, man. It's pretty clear cut.
For her part, Caroline says, I love our little family.
Oh.
And even though it's unconventional, it makes me happy. And the way she said it makes me happy, I was like, reminds me of the Twilight books where Bella is like, I will never love Jacob. But since Edward has ditched me in Union, and I've been very depressed without him, being around this boy who I genuinely see as a friend and who I know cares about me makes me happy. So I'll just keep doing that. I'll fill that void with something that doesn't really fit. Even though the person who is doing the filling is actually interested in more than I can give.
Please, no.
So to speak. No pun intended.
I think I just hit my threshold. I think that was it. I think that was the asymptote, and I've touched it. I was never supposed to go that far. I exist beyond.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I exist in a place I cannot be reached anymore.
Caroline then says that Rick is the one who's actually unfulfilled by their life together because she saw how he was geeking out over the stuff at the armory. And she says, it's pretty clear you've been Indiana Jonesing for something like that for a while now.
Hell yeah.
And I love that wordplay.
Yeah. Love it. Well done to the writer who did that.
Caroline says that they've been trying so hard to have a normal life, but their life is not normal. She's like, our kids are witch siphons, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And she says that they are pretty deep in this, I guess, supernatural lifestyle.
No matter where they go.
If that's the way it has to be, she wants to be deep in it with him. And Alaric is like, okay. Penultimate episode of season 7. Alaric is there in Chez Salvatore with Caroline and Enzo waiting for Bonnie to awaken with her new Raina life. Damon shows up and tells them that Raina's life will come with some huntress fine print. Mm-hmm. Alaric suggests to Caroline that they chain Bonnie up as a precaution in case she wakes up all vampicidal. And Caroline's like, no, we're not going to do this. We don't know how Bonnie will be when she wakes up, but if we treat her as a dangerous enemy, then we've made that decision for her.
The writers from Beyond the Veil are like, if this entire white cast changed the one black character to a wall, it's gonna look weird.
Alaric relents, but then he insists that he stays with Caroline. And Caroline's like, no, Lizzie and Josie have been stuck with a sitter for 2 days.
Right.
And
you are
Rick
parents.
already has a flight booked back home, so just go. And Alaric is like, okay, well, when Bonnie wakes up as a murderous vampire hunter, me, the only human among us right now, is
the safest
probably going to be the only one she doesn't want to kill on sight. Rick agrees to go, only after Caroline promises to be on a plane home as soon as possible, and they hug goodbye. Towards the end of the episode, Caroline calls Rick and the twins, and she tells Alaric that Bonnie the Huntress has psychically marked her.
Yeah.
Because she was inside her head, and that works as well as a phoenix sword. And now Bonnie will track her and hunt her, just as Raina did Stefan, Bo, and everyone else that the phoenix sword had stabbed. Rick sends the girls to bed, and then he tells Caroline to come home, and he's like, we can run together as a family.
Girl.
But Caroline refuses to put him and the girls in danger.
Yeah.
Which,
also,
I'm like, Alaric,
that's
girl.
an insane thing to say. Those are children.
She tells him she's going on the run with Stefan. Oops.
Yeah.
And Rick is like, where will you go? And then he's like, actually, no, it's safer if I don't know. And he tells Caroline that he loves her, and she says, I know, and that she'll call him later when she gets the chance. I love when someone replies to an I love you with an I know. Oh, final episode. We're finally here. My gosh. Alaric and the twins video call Caroline to check up on her. Caroline notes that Alaric has been stress baking. And Alaric is like, yeah, there's got to be a more masculine way to say that. Just shut up and be a father. My lord, baker is not even a gendered term.
If anything, professional baking, mostly men in that industry.
Yes.
In the whole hospitality industry. It's a reverse gender issue actually that they have. So shut your mouth. God. Everyone becomes so weird in these last couple seasons. Parodies and caricatures of themselves. I can't do it.
When they are done, he tells Caroline to stay safe, and he ends the call. Turns out they need the little munchkins to siphon away the spell that Bonnie used to seal the armory, so much for keeping them out of it. Caroline calls Rick to tell him the plan, but she says they are Rick's kids, and it's his decision. Rick then says they're our kids, and we need to make the decision together. Caroline wants to help Bonnie. Alaric is like, yeah, sure, mostly because I just want you to come home to, your daughters. Rick and the twins meet up with Caroline, and they lead the kids to the armory and instruct them on how to siphon away the spell from the door by channeling their witchy emotions. The girls are successful, and the Salvatores are able to enter.
It's a cute moment for them.
Their first spell.
Yeah.
Non-verbal. No incendia.
Sandia. Oh, gosh.
Stefan eventually exits the vault after several hours, and Caroline runs to embrace him. Rick watches them sadly, and I'm like, my guy, you've lost. It's the final episode. This is really not happening. Let it go.
Yeah, they've had their whole journey where Caroline realized what Stefan had gone through when he was marked, and it kind of makes sense now. It's a whole thing.
Once Bonnie's connection to the Eighth Everlasting is severed, she's purged of her huntress power and her predatory psychic connection to Caroline, so the scar disappears, and Alaric sees that the scar is gone, and Caroline's like, yay, Damon was successful. And Alaric says, okay, I'm gonna take the kids home now. Caroline says, I'll get my stuff and come with you. And then Rick gently tells her, no, you should stay. And he says, you've changed my life. You've completely turned my world around. And for that, I will always love you, even though I know you don't love me the same way. He does say that it's just we had these moments where we were perfectly in sync, like laughing at the kids or in tears because we were so exhausted. And I guess a part of me thought that maybe those moments might become something more. In brackets,
Okay.
I have. And who on the writers' team felt that this one-sided romantic segue was necessary? Julie Plec, you are the captain of this ship, and you shall pay for your crimes and the crew's crimes. Like, really, this little emotional side quest served no purpose other than being a superficial obstacle on the road to Sterilline. And even in that, it was superfluous, because the main hindrance for Stefan winning her back this season is that she was angry and heartbroken at him for abandoning her to go on the run for 3 years with Valerie. It was not because she was about to get into some pale imitation of matrimony, this marriage of convenience to her sort of baby daddy.
Now, how much of that was written down?
That was all written down.
Jesus Christ.
I was unraveled at this point.
No, fair. Fully fair. And I understand. And I'm right there with you. In this moment, I'm going to try and not kick this man while he's down. This is just speaking in universe. To give some credence to the potential, the larger obstacle, as you say, obviously, is the heartbreak and the conflict of like Stefan abandoned Caroline. Yes, because of this mark, but also there was a lot more going on around that. And like there needed to be that resolution. But once that resolution happens, there is now the conflict of I have a family now. And so in that vein, I guess it's part of that. Because if it was...
I'm like, couldn't we have had all that without Rick having genuine romantic interest in her?
Sure, but then
it's especially uncomfortable because of the one-sidedness of it all. Here you have, like, the optics are this older, experienced man who's been married before and has been in more relationships than Caroline, and also has not such a great history, as we've learned through Meredith Fell's snooping into his backstory, is now going to get into this marriage of convenience with this younger woman who doesn't love him, and who he says he knows doesn't love him, but he's waiting around and hoping that someday she'll wake up and develop feelings because from his side, he's all in. And I'm like, oh, no.
Listen, it's not good. At the end of the day, none of this is great. There's nothing I can say to that. I just feel it in my heart that there will be people. I mean, I doubt it because it's the Vampire Diaries, and I don't think anyone was rooting for this couple. There may be a very small... There may be some very random, like... Oh, we didn't even try to give them a ship name. No, we did. We did when we were texting, not in the podcast. Alaric? Was that what we said?
Let's pull up the...
Pull out the messages. Pull out the receipts.
Pull up the receipts. It was...
Alaric,
Carolaric, and Alaraline.
Alaraline is crazy.
Oh,
potentially in some strange corner carved out of this fandom, there might be Alaric shippers. To you, I say, I'm sure you have the argument of these are two adults, technically, because she's 21, right? Ultimately, this is a TV show and it's fiction. Everyone always has their arguments when it's like, you're the bad guy for feeling weird about this. And I'll accept that. That's fine. But at the end of the day, this is weird. And
it's so weird.
There's nothing I can do about that. I'm glad it didn't last long. Actually, it lasted the whole seasons, to be fair. So it did last very long.
In the first half, it's like simmering in the background with the flash forwards, and it's mainly the pregnancy thing. And it's like, oh, one friend helping another by being a surrogate.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the healthier surrogate dynamics, quite frankly.
You
because
know?
she's not being coerced or like forced into this situation by financial circumstances.
Yeah.
Or, some sort of power imbalance.
Yeah, she's
And
coerced by magical
weird.
circumstances, which is par for the course of the show. Then it got weird.
Yes.
I'd be curious to know. Let us know. You have our email address. You'll get it at the end of the episode. If you are like, this was cool and grand, let us know what your thoughts are. Make a case. Our court is always open. We don't turn cases away. We do judge them harshly, but that's our prerogative.
To Rick's credit, in this final speech, he does say that it wouldn't be fair to Caroline, and it wouldn't be fair to him either.
For sure.
And Caroline's like, oh, part of me loved the idea of a perfect happy family, and I didn't want to let that go. And I will note that knowing who she is and seeing who she's been and knowing where she's come from, I get that.
Yeah.
I do understand why in her mind she'd be like, this is the way it has to be, this cookie cutter sort of a family dynamic.
It's interesting you raised actually earlier, and I don't know if that's going to make it in, but like you did raise that like, yeah, she came from a family that was, divorced parents, and it's like she's used to that dynamic, but also that might be what's informing her decision to be like, I need to make a marriage work because my parents didn't.
Yeah.
Funny enough, her parents, well, not that her parents didn't love each other, it was one-sided because her dad was gay. So it's a whole, not to say he didn't love Liz, because I'm sure he did. Again, they are parents to this child. They've made this thing together. It's an intimacy that the rest of us cannot understand. But ultimately, as a romantic relationship, it was a falsehood because Bill Forbes, friend of the pod, had his own shit to work out. Maybe there's a little bit of that informing her, and we can get into it another day as to like, I gotta make this work. Rick too, it's like, I've had so many failed relationships. My wife has died twice. Like, at some point, I need to pull this off.
My final paragraph of shade before we wrap up this season. In-universe, I blame this creepy little pseudo-ship entirely on Rick.
Okay.
It is amazing that in the season which introduced Benzo and gave Matt Donovan that girlfriend that nobody remembers, this managed to be indisputably an even more unsettling and ill-conceived romantic dynamic. But Alaric tells Caroline that she should be happy, that she deserves everything she wants, and no matter what happens, you, me, the kids, we're family, and we will always be family. What a sweet sentiment. I'll remind you of it next season when you say that really shitty thing to Caroline during an argument. Let's remember this moment.
It was a heated moment. It was a heated moment. His children were kidnapped. Please, Your Honor, I beg mercy upon the courts.
Anyway, the two of them then hug, and we can finally put this icky arc to rest. I will say one thing. It certainly made me keener on Steroline than I would have been otherwise. And maybe that was Julie's genius plan all along. Placate the Stelena diehards like me by showing us that Steroline could always be replaced by something worse.
Stop! Oh, my heart hurts. Please. I would like to state for the record, I do not support nor endorse nor partake in that sort of thinking. I thought Steroline was perfectly great on its own merits, and we didn't need an alternative hell scenario to prove that. In fact, I will argue in future episodes that Steroline just does not get to catch a break in this goddamn show, and that's unfair. But we'll move on for now.
Season 8. It all comes to an end.
Yeah.
Episode 1. Hello, brother. I do think it's very cute. For all my criticisms, I think it's super cute that the last season, all the episodes are named by named after quotes. I can't remember all of them. Like some of them, I'm like, someone said this? But
was this a
some
big
of them are pretty iconic.
moving statement? Yeah.
So, hello, brother. Episode 1. Alaric is on the phone with Josie and Lizzie. Their new nanny, Celine, is in the background doing stuff in the kitchen.
It's begun. We're back.
Josie, who at this stage, I think it starts to become clear which is which if you're paying attention to who's referred to as whom. Josie is the brunette twin, which figures. She's named for her brunette bio mom.
Right. The easy rubric is the people they're named for, yeah.
Lizzie is the blonde one, who is blonde like her namesake, Elizabeth Forbes. Anyway, Josie asks Alaric when she and her sister can come to work to see his new toys. And Alaric is like, you can come see the toys when you turn 18. Alaric is at the armory, which he has somehow acquired in the time between the end of season 7 and the season 8 premiere. I guess if everyone else who worked there died. You can just walk in and say it's yours now.
Eaten by sirens. Who's gonna tell him he can't work there?
So he's now running the show. He tells the twins to put their nanny Celine on, and Celine is like, I'm such an overachiever. I've blown through Caroline's Monday to-do list. Do you need anything else? And Alaric's like, just one more of you. You wouldn't happen to have a doppelganger, would you? And she's like, am I supposed to know what this obscure German word means? And he's like, nope, not even remotely. Never mind. The joke didn't land. He's then summoned by one of his interns. He has interns now.
Yeah.
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Now we have tenure. Now we've got these college kids working for me. Things are starting to look up for Alaric Saltzman, professor at law. No, that doesn't make any sense.
At law. Said intern's name is Dorian, who will become a mainstay of this universe as time goes on. He wants Alaric to have a look at the creepy and previously impenetrable vault that lies in the bowels of the armory. Obviously, this is the same vault that the creepy siren came out of, but they don't know that yet at the end of season 7, and now has Damon and Enzo under its thrall. Dorian says that he and the other intern, Georgie, have spent weeks trying to figure out how someone could get into the vault without being seen, and that they've now found out and they want to show Alaric. But first, tell us what kind of supernatural creature popped out of here. And Rick is like, what? Supernatural? That's crazy
Don't
talk.
be
This is all a
silly.
theoretical exercise, and I've been running the armory for a couple of months now, so I'm the boss and do what I say. He claims he's just trying to figure out all its nooks and crannies, and I'm like, Rick, I can tell these people aren't buying your lie.
Yeah. They're like bored TAs really looking for something exciting. They're not gonna let it go.
But anyway, they show him that while it seems as though this cavern inside the vault has like no exit, you can actually find a secret crevice in the cavern wall if you deprive yourself of your senses of sight and hearing. They do this with blindfolds and noise-canceling headphones. And then they find a magically concealed egress in the wall of the cave. Put that in there just for you.
I love an egress. You know I do. I love an ingress and an egress, baby.
So yeah, Rick walks into the hidden tunnel and Georgie and Dorian follow him. They remove their blindfolds and sound-canceling headphones, stating that the tunnel is hidden by an optical illusion, which I'm like, wait, what? You guys have decided this isn't clearly magic? You walk through a solid wall. They're like, yeah, it's just a totally scientifically explainable optical illusion. And I'm like, all right, maybe Rick's lies will work on you.
Why not? Listen, the thing about intellectuals, if you can convince them that something's more complex than it is and you leave them to try and puzzle it out, you've won. So
Alaric asks where this tunnel goes, and Dorian's like, oh, we don't know yet. We were waiting for you to lead the way. And then Alaric is like, hesitation, caution, forethought. And Georgie is like, what's the matter? Are you claustrophobic or something? Because nothing is more effective at getting straight men to do something they don't want to do than calling their macho-ness into question, Rick is like, okay, let's go. And he starts walking. They tiptoe through the tunnel, and Georgie asks Alaric about his earlier hesitance. And she's like, I've never seen an archaeologist afraid to explore a tunnel. And Alaric is like, I now have 2 young daughters who expect me to come home in one piece, and I am more cautious with my well-being. And I'm like, you know what?
Fair enough.
That's fair. And they get to the end of the tunnel and find a hidden wooden door behind a pile of rocks. Inside, they find a room full of these cool treasures. They appear to be like paintings and statues and trinkets made of precious metals and boxes of jewelry. It looks very old and like covered in dust and cobwebs. And Alaric is like, ooh, I found the geek gold mine. I love that he's like now rebranding as this history nerd, and I'm like, oh please,
Bookish
you've been like
loser.
this drunken action hero for several seasons now.
Library kid, okay? I'm the nerd you never knew was here. I also got through that whole section without singing the Secret Tunnel song, so I'm very proud of myself.
Gosh, iconic. Meanwhile, Virginia St. John, who, if you don't know who she is, it's fine. We'll get to her in an Enzo episode. She's Enzo's distant relative who's like related to the armory. Virginia St. John, who Caroline has been trying to locate for months, breaks into the Saltzman Forbes home and attacks Celine, the nanny, who I guess deserves an Oscar for her performance in this episode.
Icon. That's so crazy that I just re-listened to the Sybil and Celine episode this week, not in preparation for this, just because I was like, I kind of want to get those insane vibes again. And we were talking about these events. Go back to that episode if you haven't listened to it. It's so good and it's so crazy.
So Virginia slits Celine's throat while Caroline is on the phone with her. She's just told Caroline that someone's in the house at this point because she found the front door open and heard someone snooping around. Caroline immediately vamp speeds home. Virginia goes off to the twins, who are difficult to find because they were in the middle of a game of hide and seek when she broke in. And fortunately, Caroline arrives home just in time to knock Virginia out as she enters the twins' room. And she finds the girls in their little go-to hiding spot, the closet. And she's like, okay, stay here. And she leaves them in there, closes the doors, and drags the incapacitated Virginia all the way down the stairs. Caroline sees Celine, who was like, I guess, unconscious from blood loss. And she's like, oh yeah, let me heal you with vampire blood. And I'm like, so Celine, how did she...
Just lying there. Just being like, any second she's gonna come over and I'm gonna have to act like I'm being compelled. Hold on. Oh, she's moving something.
But even in that, I'm like, what if Caroline hadn't gotten there and Virginia had hurt these twins? Are they not part of your master plan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess she was taking it step by step. She was gonna be like, listen, if she finds them, then obviously I pop up and I snap her neck. But right now, everything's fine.
I guess.
Pops an eye open, makes sure everything's still fine. Closes it again.
Also, psychic powers, so I guess maybe she was like telepathically tracking them to
She
the
could
house.
sing
Fair
from the
enough.
other room and make sure that girl doesn't touch those kids.
That one tune they always sing.
See how that harmonizes in the edit.
I love the one time when Sybil was like, you're starting a little pitchy, sis.
God. They're so insane.
So Georgie and Alaric are alone in the treasure room because Dorian has gone off to fetch more lights or something. And Alaric says the room is unusual because anything subterranean should have evidence of erosion, and moisture from the earth alone should have eaten through most of these artifacts, and yet everything is perfectly preserved. And I gotta love history teacher Rick. He's so fun.
Yeah. You think of that time when he was in the caves with the Futhok runes, when he was at Duke with the Sun and Moon Curse research. He's in his element.
He is the closest thing this group has to a Giles, and it's nice when that, like, Watcher energy comes out.
Exactly.
So Georgie is like, oh, it's just like the pyramids. And she discovers these skeletal remains lying in the corner. And she's about to reach for this ancient-looking book that's lying between the legs of a skeleton. But Rick is like, no, let's not disturb
Don't touch anything.
Let's lock this place down, seal it first before we start to interact with the artifacts. Georgie is like, your geek brain makes you super hot, you know that? And I'm like, okay, she just went for it, I guess. Why waste time?
I guess.
Alaric lets her down easy, though. He's like, Georgie, don't think that I don't appreciate it, but I'm pretty much closed for business. You know, it's just me and my kids and no distractions. And I was like, how horrible if your last love interest was the one that we had last season. I'm not going to reference it. I'm going to move. I'm not going to talk about last season.
Fair enough. I mean, we kind of have to because this is just another college student who's now directly under his employ. So that should be the main reason why you're closed for business in this respect. I just want to put that out there. But we'll move on.
Georgie does accept the rejection good-naturedly. She's like, it's a shame, but I had to try. You know, sexy dark tunnel, magical room, etc.
Listen, girl, I respect the hustle. You're crazy.
Dorian then shows up, addressing Alaric as Professor S, which is an interesting foreshadowing of legacies, I suppose.
I told you, all these writers are absolute nerds. Stop.
He tells him that Caroline has been calling, obviously because of the situation at home. Meanwhile, back at home, Caroline compels Celine to take Lizzie and Josie out for dinner and ice cream, and she instructs her to be gone for at least 2 hours. And Celine is like pantomiming her way through all of this,
I will take
as we'll later find out.
I will do as you say, smiling on her way out, just being like, bitch.
Then Caroline furiously interrogates Virginia as to why she went after the twins. Virginia rambles on about the vault and how she warned the Mystic Falls gang not to open it last season and how the evil within has been released. And she warns Caroline that whatever has come out of there, which we later on learn as the siren, the other siren, will come for the twins. Caroline demands she be more specific about what this thing is and what it wants, but Virginia bites out her own tongue to prevent Caroline from getting any more answers out of her. When Alaric comes home, he finds Virginia is already dead. And Caroline is disposing of the body. So I'm like, and Caroline says, I tried to heal her, but she just kept bleeding out until she died. And I'm like, why? Did she refuse the vampire blood? You force-fed it to your dad before.
That's true.
Is there some Phoenix Stony cure for immortality-esque reason why vampire blood didn't work on her? Can you bleed out from a severed tongue? I don't know.
I think yes on the very last question. Everything before that, I couldn't tell you. I guess maybe she wasn't swallowing, whereas her dad was not in a state to be able to not swallow. But her dad was speaking when she force-fed him. She says, don't be stupid, and then she force-feeds him. So, you know, I don't know.
Alaric is distressed that the one time he decides to go Scooby-Dooing through the tunnels, his kids get attacked and he's unreachable because his cell phone had no reception down there. And he asks Caroline, are we doing this all wrong? Should we just never leave the girl's side ever? And I'm like, oh, Rick, that's how every parent feels.
Exactly.
I've been told.
By this weird supernatural context, they are very much experiencing a real parental fear of like, when do we start pulling our hands off? When do we send them to daycare? Like, what's the right way to do this? God, it all feels so strangely normal.
Caroline says that she doesn't know the answer to that question, but they definitely aren't doing it right. Otherwise, somebody would not have just broken in and tried to assassinate their nanny. Alaric says, we're divided. I live 30 minutes away in some crappy apartment. I was like, oh, so he doesn't reside in this house. I guess it's not really the Saltzman Forbes home then. But technically, Lizzie and Josie are Saltzmans.
That's
and
true.
not Forbes's, so it still works. And Rick is like, we share custody, but I'm just too far away to help you out. And then Caroline's like, do you want to move back into town? And then Rick is like, no, I want to move in here.
Yeah.
And Caroline sighs and seems unenthusiastic about the idea. And she tells Rick that she wants them to be a family and a team, but they can't live together. And then Alaric is like, I didn't say you should stay.
Yeah.
And Caroline is like, that's crazy. This is my childhood home. Where am I supposed to go? And I was like, oh yeah, this is the house Liz bequeathed to you.
But it's like your boyfriend has a boarding house with 100 rooms. I think you can figure it out. Let's do this for the kids, you know?
Yeah, Rick says, you know exactly where you should go because you've wanted to be there for months now, but out of respect for my feelings, you haven't done it yet. And he tells her, again, like the end of last season, that he wants her to be happy. And he says he wants their girls to be happy and that one of these days, he plans on being happy too. And I was like, romantically? So you're not close for business? All right, I guess you were just rejecting your student the best way you knew how.
Okay, coming around. We will take that as a win.
At the end of the episode, Bonnie calls Rick to let him know that she has come to suspect, through some clues that Enzo has been leaving her, that the creature released from the armory vault is a siren, and she asks for Rick's occult studies and mythology expertise on the matter. Alaric tells her that there are many different myths, but they all basically say the same thing. Sirens use mind control to lure their victims to their death. And we've discussed that in the siren episode and criticized it. But Rick also says sirens are messages of the devil.
Love
and I'm
it.
like, that's not a thing.
Makes
in Greek
sense
mythology.
and is real and is true. Connective tissue is quite strong there, I think.
Caroline calls Alaric to check in on how the girls are doing in the wake of her moving out. And Alaric is like, they're fine. They're watching cartoons, eating big bowls of sugar. And then he pauses. And then he's like, oh, what? No. Nothing to say about eating sugary cereal? Caroline's like, since Celine almost died looking after our kids, like, you know, protecting them, I'm fine with Celine choosing their cereal. And
which is crazy. I don't know why Celine would be choosing their cereal. This is a weird, like, I think she's right.
that is she shopping for the household now?
She should not be. And if she is, she should have a list. Unless you're like paying her for that specific function, why is she picking your kids' food?
Because she goes home every night. She's not even like a live-in nanny.
Right. You know what? Maybe they pay her for that. But it's like, even then, I'd be like, Caroline, it's not insane to want to pick what your kids eat.
So Celine comes in and Alaric says goodbye to Caroline so he can talk to his nanny. Celine has like these permission slips for Rick to sign because the twins are going on a field trip. And Rick is like, what? Permission slips for a walk down to the town square? And then Celine's like, I know, right? Things were a lot simpler when I was a child. It's like, how long ago was that? Tell us quickly.
Did you have to walk down to the riverbed? What's that about?
And then sweet Celine, she has such an unassuming energy that I'm like, it's not my fault that I didn't see this twist coming.
No.
She's like, oh, by the way, Alaric, I noticed something strange. And Rick is like, oh shit, the jig is up. She knows something. And then she's like, yeah, I see you overpaid me this week. It must have been a mistake. And then Alaric's like, oh no, that wasn't an error. Caroline and I have given you a raise. And then she's like, oh, thank you. Any particular reason? He's like, oh, trust me, you've earned it.
A crazy thing to say about a woman who nearly died in your home, and as far as you know, doesn't remember that.
Oh, yes, I wrote this deliberately in a silly sentence. You know that? What's that series on Netflix with Kristen Bell? Is it a series?
The woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window. One of my favorite shows ever.
Yes. I haven't watched it. I just love that title. So I wrote, inside the treasure trove at the end of the tunnel, behind the wall, in the cave within the vault.
Nice. Nice. A++. Kristen would be proud. She didn't write the show.
No. Series creator Kristen Bell would be proud.
It's been my baby since I was very young in the business, and I'm just so grateful I get to produce this project. You know, the studio really took a risk on this.
So in there, Georgie and Alaric talk, and Georgie's like, where's Harvey? Which I think is just the nickname they gave the skeleton they found.
Yes.
And Alaric's like, I've sent him away for DNA testing. Georgie asks if he's really gonna publish a paper on sirens. She's simultaneously suspicious of what Rick is really up to here, but also very much like, but sirens? The supernatural things can't exist. You're being silly. And then he reads a journal entry from, I think, Harvey's journal, I guess, where he speaks on there being a wall where there was none before and hearing a mysterious woman's voice in the tunnels. Alaric notices a date in the journal that looks familiar to him, 1790. And he goes off to look in the armory archive room. In 1790, the armory received a mysterious shipment from the town of Mystic Falls, because everything has to be linked to that damn place.
Of course.
And we will learn this season that everything literally is. And that same date is in Harvey's journal above an entry about taking a crate to the vault and leaving the artifact above ground for safety. He goes on to read aloud a second journal entry about an item that arrived at the armory later that same year, an artifact that originated in 2200 BC. And Alaric says he's never researched anything that old, which he admits is weird. And I'm like, I'm glad you admit that's weird, because as a, historian, pseudo-archaeologist,
It's usually where people start.
Yeah, like... And then George is like, oh, it isn't any weirder than a vault that's supposed to house a supernatural creature, perhaps a siren. And I'm like, oh, Georgie,
I don't need the running commentary, Georgie.
I know what your game is.
I don't need the running commentary, honestly. You can pipe down.
And she does when Rick shows her a symbol inside the armory book that was etched in. It's that hell symbol. And upon seeing this symbol, Georgie is immediately shaken. She's like, I've seen this before. I can't deal with this right now. And she runs off. Alaric goes to talk to Georgie outside, and she's still shaken, but she shows Rick that she has that same symbol, etched in the book, tattooed on her lower abdomen. She tells Rick how she came to know about the symbol. We've spoken about it in the Siren episode. She was drunk driving, accidentally killed her friend who was in the passenger seat, flatlined for a few minutes, and in her brief journey into death, she found herself in a place of absolute despair and fear and loneliness. She saw that symbol. And when she came back to life, she was like, oh, I was definitely in hell. That's where I'm going to end up one day. Hell is real and I am scared. And that's how she got into researching all this occulty.
Hell is full, in fact, and the devils are calling me.
Alaric tells her that he believes that she has seen a piece of the puzzle, and that although he doesn't agree with her interpretation, he believes she is a first-hand source. And Georgie's like, you don't think I'm crazy? But Alaric laughs and tells her that she doesn't even approach the threshold of the crazy he's seen. Alaric comes home later on to find Celine cleaning up, and he's like, oh, sorry for coming home late. I didn't mean to derail your evening. And Celine's like, no, it's fine. I'm not in any rush. Your work is important. I live to serve.
Your work is important. When it comes back later, God, the dialogue there is pretty good, I have to say.
Rick is like, well, that remains to be seen, because so far I just have a series of tenuous connections between a journal from 1790 and my intern's secret tattoo, and unconfirmed reports of hell as a place that offers up not only emotional turmoil, but ancient mystical runes. And then Celine's like, you don't date much, do you?
Crazy.
And Alaric's like, yeah, it's been a while. And then Celine says, but you know where your intern's secret tattoo is?
Yeah. Yeah, you really dropped that, no question.
And Alaric says, only because of research. And Celine is like, oh, no judgment.
I'm judging.
Rick gets a phone call from Georgie, and Celine leaves for the night. And Georgie tells Rick that she has discovered a missing artifact from 1790, a sort of forked spear or prong made of metal. And the shape of the artifact matches a part of the symbol that Georgie has tattooed on her. And she tells Rick, I think this artifact was made in hell. Next episode, Stefan goes to talk to Alaric about the impending Steroline wedding, and Alaric tells Stefan, Caroline's already told me about her engagement. I promise you I'm fine with it. Echoes of season 7 still reverberate within these walls.
What little rivalry is left. Yeah. Responsible, I like it.
And Stefan's like, yeah, I know Caroline told you. I just wanted to talk to you myself. And then Alaric jokes that, hey, I got 2 unused Flower Girl dresses that I can sell you cheap. And I'm like, oh, from your almost wedding to her? Let's not go there.
Also, why are we selling them? Just put them on the kids. They're going to be at the wedding. What are we talking about?
Hey, he's got kids to provide for. Make that money. Hustle your way. Georgie walks in with a pile of research books, and she's like, yeah, he's fine with it. And I'm like, Georgie, whoops are you? Like,
who invited you? You don't even know this man. I need you to stop acting like you're going to have a lasting presence on this show, because that's insane. Thinking you're in the Mystic Falls gang? Bestie.
Shame.
I'm sorry.
Probationary period that you will not survive. She and his other intern, who you barely see his face, but it's definitely not Dorian. I could tell from the hair. They get started on some work in the other room. And Alaric's like, yeah, I'm working from home today because Celine has the day off. I can't imagine what Celine was doing. Knowing everything we know. Stefan says Caroline told him that Rick might have figured out how the armory captured the siren in the first place. And Alaric is like, it's wild speculation, but I think it might have something to do with this pronged, forky artifact that Georgie has found. And Stefan's like, are we supposed to stab the siren with it? Or
Like a piece of fish?
I mean, you know what? Why not?
Why
Fish
not?
on a stick.
I'm with it.
Alaric says it's a possibility, but he warns that since we're dealing with a creature who can control minds, we need to be very sure before we approach her, or she will enthrall us if our attack plan doesn't work. Meanwhile, Sybil the Siren sends Damon to kill Bonnie. Caroline is able to save her for the time being. They call Stefan to let him know what's going on, and Stefan is like, hey, Alaric, you know how you had to figure out how this possible weapon or weakness works? Well, your timetable's been moved up. You now have mere hours to do that, not days. Later on, Alaric finds the twins playing with the artifact. The girls start to fight over it. They're like, I had it first. No, I had it first.
I'm an annoying child who doesn't have a brain that works.
I'm putting a lot more emotion into the performance than they do, but it's
Not you shading my girls in this fashion.
Incendia.
I will not have Lily Rose and Tierney be slandered.
I wish them nothing but the best.
Yes,
but watching
go well.
this back, I was like, your delivery is more wooden than I remember. Are
Listen.
you the producer's nieces or something?
Listen, we can't all be McKenna Grace. We can't all be Jacob Tremblay, all right? Some of us are actually four in our brains and not little actors ready for our SAG memberships, you know? Some of us are worried about plasticine.
Rick sees the girls fighting over it and he's like, drop it. And they do. And when the fork hits the ground, it emits this reverberating, ringing sound that causes the girls to shriek in pain. Georgie comes in and then apologizes for leaving the fork out where the girls could get it.
Because she did.
And Alaric is like, no, it's fine. It seems this pitchfork is actually more like a tuning fork. Later on, Alaric hurries to take the fork to his allies and help them fight Sybil. He's still not being candid with Georgie. So as he's on his way out, Georgie is like, I can see you lying to me, sir. What is really going on? And Alaric's like, okay, fine. I admit, I'm going to do battle with a mythical creature from the ancient world. Wish me luck. Knowing that she wouldn't believe him. Well, the joke's on you, Rick, because she secretly followed you.
She gonna stalk you like a stalker. And it's not in the sexy way, which I think you would enjoy.
So Alaric arrives in time to hit Damon with his car and save Bonnie from him. And then he strikes the fork against his car and causes a ringing sound that hurts and weakens Sybil as she comes out with Enzo to intervene. Stefan arrives and snaps Enzo's neck before he can help Sybil, and Caroline knocks Sybil out. Damon, however, is not unconscious, so he just gets into his car and drives off with like ominous warnings of how he'll be back to cause more trouble. And in the distance, we see Georgie in her own car has witnessed the whole thing. That night, Alaric and Stefan share a drink at a bar, and Alaric tells Stefan that his engagement is good news, and he forgot to say congratulations earlier. And I'm like, okay, good. Hatchet officially buried.
There we
Thank
go.
goodness. Let us never go down this road again. Stefan is like thankful, but he's too busy lamenting the failure of the Mystic Falls gang to save Damon to really be like appreciative. And Alaric says that he believes that if Stefan has gotten Damon back all these times before, he can do it again. But Stefan is like, no, it's different this time. I guess because despite them managing to take Sybil down, she still has like a long distance psychic hold
over
on
him.
Damon's mind.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the episode, Damon murders Tyler.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
Next episode. At the armory, Rick observes an imprisoned Sybil as Stefan continues to use the fork's reverb to hurt/weaken her. And Alaric wants to know what it is about the fork exactly that hurts Sybil and why it also hurts Lizzie and Josie. So Sybil starts to tell Stefan and Alaric the story about how she was banished to her little island. Listen to the Siren episode to see how exactly that plays out. But she reveals that she has a sister and that sister will do anything for her. Which I guess from Sybil's side in her own mind is a lie because
Gambit.
we later on find out she fully feels that the sister abandoned her.
She's like, listen, if I scare them enough, I can make a negotiation. Because that bitch left me 200 years ago and I hate her ass. So...
Alaric is surprised that there are two sirens, and then Sybil mocks him for being a historian who is shocked by the existence of more than one siren when every mythological interpretation of sirens refers to them in the plural.
Right.
So
what are we even...
I'm like, Rick, she's got you there.
You know, even with her nonsense existence, she is correct.
Alaric points out that, well, some of those myths also say that you should have the lower half of a bird. So I was like, oh, so he does know.
Mm-hmm. They just don't want to talk about it.
So Georgie breaks into Alaric's home to snoop through the book with the hell ruin etched into it. But she sets off an alarm. And she's like, oh, snap the alarm. Let me just steal the book and skedaddle before anyone comes home. But Celine arrives at that exact moment. Celine's like, don't move. I'm going to call the police. And she sees it's Georgie. She's like, oh, it's the intern. And then Georgie's like, oh, the nanny. And I'm like, all right, what's this energy?
What is this cat fight? Over Alaric? Like, I guess. I mean, I was singing his praises early on, but at this point, it's like, Alaric? All right.
This is your fight.
Hard to find a man in rural Virginia, I guess.
I guess. Especially with the Mystic Falls gang killing them off all the time.
Yeah, you know.
Celine then asks Georgie, do you break into houses often? And Georgie's like, well, I had to get into Rick's bed somehow.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh, Georgie. The joke doesn't land because like Celine just blinks. And then George is like, Alaric sent me to get this journal and bring it back to the armory, but I forgot to ask for the keys to his place. So I figured I'd save myself an embarrassing phone call and just break in.
Yeah, reasonable.
Celine is not buying it. She's like, well, the call I'm about to make is probably even more embarrassing. And she whips out her phone to tell on Georgie. Georgie tries to leave. And then Celine is like, nah, you should stay put. And Georgie's like, I think you should stick to naps and snacks. And I'm like, all right, girls, what's happening here?
No idea what the energy is here. Frankly, Georgie, you should have just ran. The fact that you're having this conversation is crazy. You've got what you wanted.
I'm just like, I don't know where this catfighty energy is coming from. It's like this is the first time you've met, and I don't think you really discussed each other before now. So
it's a
where
weird
is this animosity
external
built up from?
energy that, like, independently, these are two, which it's weird in itself because it never goes anywhere. It's like, ooh, two possible love interests for Rick, and it's like one dies and one turns out to be a siren. So why did we have this? I don't know. So now they have to have a cat fight over a character who's not interested in either of them, it seems. And also it's like, Georgie, are you intent on keeping your job after this? How do you plan on swinging that?
Apparently not.
You've stolen from the man. Why are you here talking as though you need to smooth it over with Celine? Run out the front door. Crazy.
So Celine is then like, I'm calling Alaric, and Georgie grabs her hand, causing her to drop the phone, and she's like, I really wouldn't do that if I were you. She seems very menacing. She's a red herring.
To set her up to be the other siren, yeah.
Although, interestingly, while Rick and Stefan are interrogating Sybil, Rick gets the phone call from Celine, and he steps out to take the call, and Sybil is like, Celine, that's a suspicious name. Very siren-y. And I guess we were supposed to think she's just trying to goad these people.
It's a double red herring.
Celine on the phone with Rick. At this point, Georgie has left, and I guess we're supposed to assume she just got away. But she's like, Georgie broke into your house and took one of your books, and she said she was bringing it back to you. And then Alaric is like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Are the twins okay? And Celine's like, no, we're all fine. And then Alaric senses someone moving about in the armory, and he's like, yeah, Celine, I'm gonna have to call you back. Grabs a knife and goes to investigate. Turns out it's Georgie. She lures him into the cave inside the vault and shuts him inside.
Yeah.
As Sybil finishes her story with Stefan, Georgie shows up, vervains Stefan, and this allows Sybil some respite from the tuning fork nonsense so she can enter Stefan's mind and reveal some more truths to him. Alaric tries and fails to find his way out of the tunnels by blindfolding himself. He records a message as he's like feeling about the walls. He's like, okay, this isn't working. Let me record what he calls a modern day version of a dead man's journal.
Yeah.
Even though he has every intention of getting out, but I guess, contingencies.
Safety, might as well.
He's like, I now believe Georgie is the second siren, but thanks to her and Dorian, I know that there's a way out of this place. I just need to deprive myself of my sight and my hearing. And he's like, the blindfolding part is easy. The sound part is a bit harder, but nothing some vampire blood can't fix later on. And then after ending the recording and stealing his nerves, he grabs the knife and stabs it into each of his ears, deafening himself.
The thing about that is, how do you know how far in it needs to go? To mess up your hearing.
Because your eardrum is pretty deep in there.
Oh, if you knew the way my body is contorted in this moment, that I just picture a pretzel, but then you crush it in your fist.
Ultimately, it is revealed to the audience that siren number 2 is Celine when Georgie calls her from her car and informs her that I've trapped Alaric just like you told me to.
Yeah.
Celine having psychically forced her. Alaric eventually makes his way out of the tunnels and ends up in Mystic Falls Town Square, which is quite a bit away from the armory.
Sure
I had
is.
forgotten that.
At some point, I want a map of all the underground tunnels that exist in this stretch
This
of the
hollow
southeastern U.S.
in the Vampire Diaries. Celine meets up with Georgie, kills Georgie.
Yep.
But not before telling her that she is going to hell.
Yeah,
with Kate.
you were correct. Just to confirm your suspicions, you will be burning in hell.
Next episode, Matt brings Tyler's body to Mystic Falls and informs everyone that Damon has killed him. Celine is like, oh, shame, Alaric, go mourn with your friends.
I'll take
babysit
care of the
twins."
kids.
Winks at the camera.
Yeah.
It's so funny how actors are directed because now that the audience knows that she's evil,
She has to shift.
Yeah, she's suddenly, her energy, her body language is quite different
Now
from
I'm
the first 4
sinister.
episodes.
Now I'm putting a double meaning into everything I say. I'm Celine.
Downstairs in the armory holding cell, Alaric is giving the fork a ring in order to cause her pain. And he's like, that's for Tyler, since he blames her for Tyler's death. Although she claims that, Damon was mostly doing that on his own.
Yeah, she just kind of gave him a suggestion and he was like, I know what I'm gonna do.
Alaric asks Sybil where Georgie is, still believing her to be the second siren. Sybil doesn't correct him, and he tells her that he has set up an intercom system in the armory so that from now on, the noise of the fork ringing will hurt and haunt her 24/7. Welcome to your psychic hell, he tells her. Before leaving, he instructs Dorian to strike the fork every hour on the hour, and Dorian's like, why though? Rick says, I believe the vibrational motion had something to do with the formation of the tunnels. And Dorian is like,
What?
that makes almost no sense. So Alaric is like, okay, how about this? Do it because I said so.
Fair. You know what? I respect that. You are my professor.
I'm like, this is such an important thing that Rick needs to be done in his absence, and he has not told Dorian why he needs to do it or how high the stakes are.
And it will be the downfall.
Alaric also tells Dorian that he received an odd text from Georgie the previous night saying she had to leave town suddenly. Dorian is like, what? Georgie would never ditch work while we're in the middle of research. And Alaric is like, I agree, in brackets, not because I trust her work ethic, but because she's definitely the second siren.
No, yeah.
So he tells Dorian, call Georgie's roommate and find out what's up. At Tyler's funeral, Matt, Alaric, Stefan, and Caroline find 4 already dug out graves waiting for them. And Damon shows up and is like, I'm gonna kill all 4 of you before this season is over. He force feeds Matt his blood and threatens to turn him into a vampire. He chides Caroline for the innocent people she killed in her no humanity era. And I'm like, girl,
Okay.
that was 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, like who cares? If we're going back seasons, let's pull up your rap sheet.
You know?
But I guess that's his point, right? He's like, I'm so bad, y'all all must hate me, and then everything will be fine. It's like, okay. I don't think I care!
Alaric is like, dude, what happened to you? And Damon is like, I am who I've always been. And I'm like, I mean, Rick, he's kind of
He
right.
has got a
But
point.
Rick is like, no, you're different. Which Damon scoffs at. Caroline is sick and tired. She's like, Damon, just go.
Real.
After confirming that they all hate him now and that killing Tyler has severed his ties with this group, Damon finally leaves. Later on, Stefan, Caroline, and Rick are in the grill together and they discuss Damon. And Alaric reminds them that, hey guys, this isn't Damon, but rather Damon under the influence of a she-devil, his words. And he says they have to find a way to break her control, and they will. He's like, I've got my interns working on it. And I'm like, Rick, you just loved saying that, didn't
Yeah.
you?
He loves the power. He loves the official standing. Also, does he like Damon again? When did that happen?
I guess
off
toward
season.
the end of season 7,
Yeah.
when he apologized.
They had a summer after that, and he was like, who actually cares that much?
Or maybe he felt bad that Damon spent the holidays under the control of
True,
whatever creature
that's right.
had popped out of the vault. But Caroline is like, are we supposed to just let Damon run wild, kill another one of our friends?
Right.
So Alaric assures her that he's trying to prevent that, and Stefan suggests that they put Damon down for a while so that he doesn't cause any more damage to his own soul or reputation or whatever by the time they free him and Lena wakes up. I'm like, okay. Sure, yeah, because he's the priority here, not the people he'll hurt. Alaric goes back to the armory. Dorian is there, and Dorian tells Alaric that Georgie's roommate said all of Georgie's stuff is still in her room, so if she left, she didn't take any of it with her. And Alaric tells him, okay, call the police and file a missing persons report. And then he asks, how's the frequency research coming? And Dorian is like visibly annoyed at having to bang a tuning fork as though it constitutes scientific research.
God, imagine you're a black man who got into this like prestigious historian program at like an Ivy League school. And here are these people making you hit a fork against the wall every hour.
I think like Georgie, at this point, he suspects there's more to this. Because he asks Rick, he's like, are you ever going to tell me what this is really about? And Rick is like, someday, which I guess... foreshadowing.
He did. You know, he will.
Later on, Celine has taken Josie and Lizzie to a carnival. Celine mesmerizes an employee into giving the twins a goldfish for their efforts. And then when the twins notice that it's dead, she's like, let's take the fish home. Give it a proper burial. And that's when she builds that funeral pyre and gets the twins to ignite it. Incendia. And starts revving up the level of her grooming them for Cade. Unbeknownst to the girls, Georgie's remains are under the wood of the funeral pyre, and it's like, yikes. The police eventually find Georgie's remains and notify Dorian. He leaves, and, you know, because he does not think that this tuning fork is as serious as his friend and colleague being dead because Rick didn't tell him what it was about.
Yep.
While the armory is empty, Sybil escapes, and she also takes the tuning fork with her and frees Damon. At night, the gang meets at the carnival and says goodbye to Tyler properly, this time with no Damon interruptions. Bonnie and Enzo are present this time as well, so yay.
Congrats.
Alaric's final words about Tyler are, he was strong in the face of so much loss. And I'm like, yeah, and you would know, Rick. Like, you would know. As they enjoy the carnival, Alaric writes in the journal that they've now decided is just going to be one shared journal that they'll rotate between them.
Honestly, efficient. Save the paper, save the trees.
Dear Elena, we missed you today. It was a bad one in a long series of bad ones.
Oh.
But you'd like how we came out of it. I think we made you proud.
Cute.
Afterwards, Alaric calls Celine to check in on the girls, and she's like, no, they're just doing a little arts and crafts project before bed.
Oh my God. They're busy drawing the devil and hell with their little crayons.
At the end of the episode, Caroline shows photos of the twins with Celine to Matt, and he's like, that's the siren, girl.
Yep. The big bad is in your house.
Caroline and Rick rush home to the house, but the twins and Celine are already gone. They only find creepy little crayon drawings of the twins with Celine and Cade.
Yep.
Episode 6. The police are there. They're questioning Alaric about Celine and the twins' disappearance. Afterwards, Alaric phones Celine, who is at a diner with the girls. She has the audacity to pick up.
Yeah.
I'm like...
Yeah, she thinks she's in control of the full situation. What does she have to fear, you know?
I do love this scene, though, because he asks where the girls are, and she's like, they're safe with me, and then he asks to speak to them, and she's like, nope, can't do that. Begs her to bring the twins back home, and she's like, nope, can't do that either, because they're special, and you've always known that. Special girls have special needs. She doesn't deign to tell him any more about her plans, but she claims that she's saving them from a lifetime of pain.
Which is like... What?
I don't know what she meant by that. I'm like, you're trading them into slavery. So
Right.
I don't know what you mean.
So I don't get it. I maybe it's from some personal sense of like, as a psychic girl, and it's like, okay, one, it was in 2200 BC, probably much more difficult then as opposed to now where people don't believe in that shit. And also, who's going to tell anyone? Also, two, the twins aren't psychic. They're just witches. They're not even witches, they're siphons. So it's like your spaza shop plan to replace you and your sister with these kids does not then mean that they have the same experience as you. So I don't know what's going on there.
The director yelled siphon, but she heard psychic. Alaric tells her that he couldn't give a damn about her plans because they're never going to happen. And he tells her, and I quote, I'm gonna find you, and I'm gonna kill you. No discussions, no last-minute pleas for my sympathy. You have been in my home with me, and somehow in all your scheming, you've missed just how far I'm willing to go to protect my children. I'm not coming for you, I'm coming for them. But the longer you run, the more I'm gonna hurt you. And I was like, damn!
Even she was gagged.
It's all very Liam Neeson and Taken, and I love that for him.
Right. And we're going to ignore the dad power fantasy of the Taken movies, but like this moment is really cool.
Oh No, even Celine, immortal siren with psychic powers, is so
She
shook
was
that she just
gagged.
hangs up without saying anything. Then Sybil and Damon walk in, and it's like, ugh.
Whatever.
Stefan wants to go with Caroline and Rick to look for the girls, and Caroline's like, nope, you have to stay behind. The sirens are behind the twins' abduction, and that means Damon will be mixed up in all of this.
Exactly.
And if Damon tries to get between me and my kids, I will kill him.
Yep.
And she hands Stefan back the engagement ring that he gave her and says that until all this is over, there is no Stereline. There is only her and her kids and their father. Her family is depending on her, and she cannot afford any compromises or distractions, especially when it comes to Damon.
Such a good
And I'm
moment.
like, you know what,
all
girl?
around.
Yes.
All around. Because she said, I love you. You have a blind spot when it comes to your brother.
Yes.
So I will not be entertaining any shenanigans when I go there and I kill him when he tries to stand between me and my kids. And I am telling you that.
Alaric comes in at the tail end of this convo. It's a bit awkward, but he quickly says, Matt has a partial trace on Celine's cell phone, so we know that she's near Oakwood. And he and Caroline leave to rescue their kids. From Bonnie and Enzo's side, Enzo is now being psychically attacked by Sybil. Bonnie brings him to Stefan, and Stefan's like, all right, let me enter his mind and try to help. By doing so, he's able to hack Sybil's psychic connection with Enzo and see that they are in a diner. So that narrows down the places that Rick and Caroline have to search through. As Alaric and Caroline drive around searching for the exact diner that the sirens are in, they're both agitated and prickly. Alaric is like, the last 3 diners have been dead ends, you know. And then Caroline's like, well, I have faith that Stefan will locate the sirens and the twins. And Alaric is like, if you had that much faith in Stefan, it would be him driving you here, not me.
Damn!
And you'd still be wearing the ring that Stefan gave you. So,
All right.
all right.
All right. We're all heated. We're all stressed.
When Caroline and Rick arrive at the diner, it is the correct one, but it's empty. Rick speaks to Stefan on the phone, and he urges him to continue doing whatever it is he's doing with Enzo because it seems to be working. He can tell the sirens were just here, so they must be close. Stefan is reluctant to continue to mess around with Enzo's head because Sybil is telepathically torturing him, and it's breaking him down from the inside.
Yeah.
And Stefan feels that his own mental interference is making Enzo even worse. Then Alaric is like, I don't care. My kids are my priority, and Enzo's link to Sybil is the best way of finding them.
To me.
And he says, if you have to turn Enzo's brain into oatmeal to locate the twins, then that's what you do.
Ooh.
And I'm like, Rick is not playing anymore. He's like, no.
Not when his children are concerned.
I'm done putting y'all vampires, peripheral Mystic Falls gang members before myself.
Telling me I need to worry about that man's brain. Excuse me?
Stefan is like, can I speak to Caroline? Rick looks at Caroline, who shakes her head, and he's like, yeah, she doesn't want to talk to you. Now's not a good time. And Stefan is like, okay, well, just make sure she knows that I'm doing everything I can. And then Rick is like, yeah, well, do more. And then he hangs up.
Frankly. Don't center yourself. It's not about you. Stefan, I love you, but sometimes...
The sirens and Damon and the twins go to a motel where they plan on summoning Cade. Alaric later on finds a cop that Sybil has killed, which serves them as a lead. And he speaks to Matt on the phone, and Matt tells him that Enzo is now unconscious and Stefan still hasn't gotten anything more out of him.
Damn it.
Alaric hangs up and furiously punches a car window, cracking the glass. And I'm like, whoa, we're sliding back to...
I mean, this is the
Rick.
thing about rational and irrational anger. This is a fairly rational scenario to be a little bit pissed, you know?
Yeah. He vents to Caroline that, Celine has been right in front of him the whole time and he should have noticed something or felt something. And Caroline's like, it's okay, we will find the twins. Stefan enters Enzo's mind again, reluctantly, and interrupts Sybil's ongoing mental torture fest, and he demands to know where the twins are. And Sybil is like, well, if you promise to come to me alone, I'll drop the addy, because me and Damon have an offer for you. Stefan tells Matt the address of the wrong motel to give to Alaric and Caroline, while he goes to the right one and beats them there.
Yeah.
Caroline realizes this, calls Stefan, and he's like, don't worry, I have a plan to fix all of this, and hangs up. Caroline then speaks to Alaric, and he is very upset at this point, and he says that his daughters should not be living this life, and that when they get them back, he is taking Josie and Lizzie as far away from, quote, all of you as possible. Caroline is like, I'm sorry, what? And Alaric says that Darkness follows vampires wherever they go. And Caroline is now also starting to get upset, and she's like, Rick, take a breath. You can't blame this on me. And Alaric is like, why not, Caroline? My kids should never have been involved in this. And then Caroline says, our kids. And then Rick is like, no, my kids. They're mine, Caroline. Mine and Joe's. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Alaric.
It's low.
Alaric Saltzman.
It's a low blow.
No. I was like, if you wanted to be able to pull that card, then that should have been this relationship dynamic from the get-go. It should have been, you are Auntie Caroline. That's all you will be. Not help me raise these kids. They call you mom. You call them your kids. And then when I get angry, I pull rank and I say, well, you're not biologically involved here, so you don't get a say. I'm like, no.
He's heated.
That's not right.
Their kids are missing. Okay, and it is the vampire drama that's causing issue. We know he's never liked vampires, even if he has a couple of vampire friends. It's the reality of the situation that they're always up to some shit, and he got out and got roped right back in against his better judgment, and now is like, well, this was a mistake and I need to reset.
Yeah.
So it's not fair, but it is real.
At the motel, Sybil and Celine summon Cade. He seems interested in having the twins as his slaves, but Sybil makes another offer. She's like, use the Salvatore brothers instead.
They're such accomplished killers. And they're not 3-year-olds.
They're not
like,
3-year-olds.
This plan, when you think about it, is kind of crazy.
And they already have their own built-in psychic powers, I
Yeah,
guess.
like-
gosh, so many different psychics in this universe.
Frankly, Cade was going through a lot of trouble to make these sirens. Just get a couple of vampires. I guess they didn't exist at the time, you know?
So Stefan agrees to this plan. Alaric and Caroline arrive at the motel, and Stefan brings the twins back to them. The two are relieved and overjoyed to be reunited with the girls. At the end of the night, Caroline and Alaric watch over the twins as they sleep in a room at the armory. They're like hooked up to an IV, and it looks very like hospital-ish. I don't know. Maybe they were worried they'd be dehydrated after being lugged around all day. But Celine was feeding them. She took them to a diner.
Yeah, she took them to a diner to feed a bunch of 3-year-olds diner food from some truck stop on the edge of nowhere.
There's kiddies menus.
You see, the sugary cereal she was feeding them, I'm telling you, letting that woman feed their kids, bad mistake.
Caroline says that the twins should be sleeping in their own beds, but Alaric says he just wants one of the doctors here to check them out before they take them home in the morning. And I'm like, wow, the armory even has doctors?
I don't know.
If all the employees died and Rick just got control over it, how did he find new employees? Who is paying these people?
I don't know.
Like,
the more questions I ask about the armory, the more it starts to unravel, and I don't have the time to be sitting there with spools of thread in my hand.
We don't have time. We don't have time. Alaric, to his credit, apologizes to Caroline for the things he said earlier that night.
Yeah.
Caroline tells him that he's right. Genetically, Josie and Lizzie are not hers, but she gave birth to them, she raised them, she loved them.
Exactly.
And when they went missing, she felt like she was dying. And she says, so don't you ever throw that in my face again. Rick is just like, I won't.
Absolutely not. It was a heated moment. I said a really dumb thing, and I won't say it again. Real.
He says, I was out of my mind, Caroline. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to protect my own children. And then Caroline tears up and says, yes, you do. And she tells him that he was right, that right now, wherever she goes, darkness follows her. So he needs to take the twins someplace safe until this is all over.
I do love this back and forth in the episode because it starts somewhere emotional. And when they settle down, there is very much reason in that discussion of like, this is what our life is, and we have children in the mix.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you've got to make these decisions and these compromises because it's not about y'all anymore. You've got to put that pride and ego out the door because the main thing is that the kids are safe and they grow up happy and healthy.
And I mean, for all the times that Alaric, along with Elena, was like concerned for Jeremy's safety and was like, we have to send Jeremy away. He's just a kid. He shouldn't be here. And I was like, this is a 17-year-old who deserves the right to make some of his own decisions since most of you are also teenagers.
Right.
And I was like, okay, these these are little kids. And
This
we need
is
to
where
get them
you
out of this
apply the
war zone.
principle, exactly.
So at the end of that episode, Alaric speaks to Matt and he thanks him and says sometimes he thinks Matt is the only sane voice in this parade of crazy they call their lives. And I'm like, yeah, it was Matt who encouraged you to get yourself and Joe out of town
That's true.
before your wedding. And Matt says even he has a threshold for how much pain he can watch his friends go through, and sometimes he wants to fight back. And so Alaric and Matt go to the Mystic Grill and attack Damon. They both shoot him, with Rick saying, "Thanks for showing up. I've been wanting to kill someone all day." He kicks Damon down and he tells him that he can't have his kids in danger anymore, and they will always be in danger as long as Damon is alive. And Damon is like laughing at Rick because he's like, "I just made the deal of a lifetime. Hopefully 1,000 lifetimes," alluding to his newly minted contract with Cade. Alaric doesn't ask him what he means and continues to beat him up until eventually it's Matt who tells him, "Okay, Damon's had enough. Just finish
kill
the
him."
job." So Alaric pulls out a stake and says, "This is for Tyler," before plunging it into Damon's heart and killing him.
Dope.
And I'm like, yes, the very thing you joined this show to do in the
Finally.
first place.
Finally, 11 years. No, it's still 8 years. 8 years later. You do the thing that needs to be done. But of course, because it's goddamn Damon, he will not die.
The next episode, Christmas episode, Stefan's with Caroline at Chez Salvatore, trying to make the most of his last day of freedom, and Alaric and the twins arrive for Christmas dinner. Alaric warns Caroline that they won't be able to stay for very long, and Caroline's like, "Why? This is the last time I'm gonna see them for a while." And Rick tells her that he assumes she hasn't spoken to Matt today. Josie's like, "Is Celine coming to dinner?" She's like really stunned as to why they still hold affection for their kidnapper. And Alaric says they must not have registered the danger of
they're
Celine's
3.
kidnapping because they keep asking for her, like ever since he got them back. And Caroline says that she doesn't want the girls thinking Celine is safe. She's like, "I'll talk to them." And Rick is like, no, I'll do it once we leave. Then Damon and Sybil show up. Damon very much alive. They invite themselves over for Christmas. And it's like, oh yeah, because of Cade, now Damon is like
Deathless.
fully, truly immortal. Alaric is like, "I killed you." And Caroline's like, "What?" And he's like, no, he deserved it.
He always does.
Which, true. So Alaric takes the twins home as precaution. Later on, he's telling bedtime stories, Christmas bedtime stories to the twins. And he's like, "You have to go to sleep soon because Santa is scheduled to drop by any minute."
Oh, God.
And then Lizzie says, "Uncle Stefan says our house is the safest place in the world." And Alaric agrees, but warns them to never open the doors for anyone besides himself, Caroline, and Stefan. And I'm like, what about Matt and Bonnie?
No, none of them.
They're still on the team.
You don't know those people. Stranger danger.
But then Lizzie adds, "and Celine." And Rick is like, oh gosh.
She's got her hooks
Not
in
this
deep.
again. Bonnie and Enzo go over to Sybil's house and they find Celine there. And she's like, "I mean you no harm. I just want you to give me your phone so I can call Alaric." She calls him and Rick is like, "What the hell do you have to say?" And Celine tells him that as she was giving them training and preparing them for Cade, she has left a psychic imprint. And if she doesn't remove that imprint, they will always be linked to her. And she tells Alaric, "The girls must be showing signs of it by now." And Rick is like, "No, this conversation is over. I'm hanging up now." So Celine tells Bonnie and Enzo, "A new deal. You can have this weapon. Just convince Alaric to let me unlink the twins." It seems that she's developed genuine affection for them, and now that she knows that Cade will never take her deal, she's like, there's no need for these kids to suffer.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, strange but sweet, I guess.
I mean, listen, who wants a couple of kids to suffer? Certainly a lot of people in this world, but not her.
Yeah.
When she was one of a couple of kids that suffered 2,000 years ago.
She also thinks that, you know, if she can redeem herself quickly,
She won't go
end
to
up in
hell, which is not how it works.
It's not how it works. Cade is not a fair god.
Multiple times. There's no avoiding it.
Alaric goes back to Chez Salvatore while Sybil and Damon are busy bullying Peter Maxwell, Matt's dad. And Damon's like, "Oh, we were just asking Peter what's the worst thing he's ever done." And Alaric says, "Well, mine was not making sure you were permanently dead.
Real.
I see you're wreaking havoc as usual."
Real.
By this point in the story, you can see that everyone is just so tired of Damon.
Just
They're not
sick
even
of
angry
his
anymore.
shit.
They're just over him.
Just like, why are you here?
And now we can't even kill you. It's just so exhausting.
It's so annoying.
At the end of the night, Alaric does eventually, I guess at Bonnie and Enzo's insistence, bring the twins to say goodbye to Celine at the Salvatore house, though. And he says he's doing this for them and not for her. She undoes the mind link and she tells them they won't remember her, but that's okay because they have so many people that love them. And I'm like, oh, shame. At the end of the episode, we just see Rick and Caroline watching over the twins as they open their Christmas presents. And Alaric tells Caroline that he and the girls need to get going.
Yeah.
So they are gone for several episodes and they come back for the last handful. Episode 12, Matt wakes up cold and sweaty in the armory tunnel after having a series of visions. Alaric, who has just popped back into the show, finds him and asks how he got there. And Matt's like, something's wrong with me. A little bit later, Matt is speaking to him and he describes how he's been experiencing these sensations of pain and suffering from hell. And Alaric initially wonders if maybe it was just a nightmare because you rang the Maxwell bell and who knows what that might have unlocked in your psyche when you nearly burned down Mystic Falls. Then Dorian comes in and he's like, no, that's silly. This is the Vampire Diaries. It's obviously not just a dream. The necklace that Matt has is actually a witch talisman that is tied to the Maxwell bloodline. They believe that the necklace is linking Matt to one of his ancestors and allowing him to experience their memories. Damon shows up. At this point, he's good again.
Yeah.
So, well, as good as Damon can be.
Yeah.
He needs to borrow a book about the Maxwell family. Alaric tells him what's going on with Matt and that they do not want to give Damon this journal. And Damon explains that it's for Cade and he's made yet another deal. And if they want to stop him, they will have to kill him. Again. And Rick is like, fine, have it your way.
Right.
And he vervains Damon.
Brilliant.
And I'm like, why didn't you kill him though?
You did it once before. Just do it again.
Damon wakes up in an armory cell. Right outside the cell, Alaric and Dorian hypnotize Matt in order to access his ancestors' memories. And I'm like, look at you, Alaric, in your Professor Shane era.
Truly, Elena had his tea red. She had the leaves splayed out in front of her. She said, you're going to be this man in 2 years, 3 years. You got the haircut, you got the jacket, now you're hypnotizing people.
And very briefly had lost his wife and children. So, you know, messing around with things he shouldn't have to get them back.
Yeah.
In the midst of all this, Matt starts to like get hurt, so they let Damon out to heal him, and then Damon runs away with the book.
Great. Win. Love it.
Damon eventually returns to the armory, where Alaric is speaking to Dorian. Dorian leaves, and Alaric and Damon speak about the Maxwell journal and some Salvatore drama, and Alaric chews Damon out for stealing the journal because he has no idea how important it is. And Damon reveals that he knows it was an instruction manual on how to kill Cade, and that he only gave Cade the journal because he also knows how it ends. And he has Rick follow him into the tunnels. Basically, Damon's like, yeah, I know how to kill Cade with the ashen dagger.
You're
a weapon made from his own burned bones.
We're so far beyond the point of anything I care to remember or genuinely remember about this season. So you can't bounce it off me.
The important thing at the end of this episode is that suddenly Kai Parker walks into the room and is like, I have a better idea. Kai prattles on about the exact nature of this spectral body of his that's been released from hell. Rick loses his cool and lunges at him with the ashen knife. I guess if it can kill Cade, it can kill Kai.
God, you'd hope. And just to really put everyone back into the mind of it, this is the man who killed his wife and unborn children until, turns out, not the children, but still his wife.
Yep. He snarls that Kai murdered his wife. And then Kai is like, well, fiance. It was mid-ceremony. So.
Kai Parker, how we've missed you. God. I find him, obviously I like the character Kai. This is the only bit of him where I'm just like, I can't be with the joviality. It's too real to me.
He does say, that was a huge mistake. I see that now. And I'm like, yeah, sure you do. Damon pulls Rick back and asks Kai how he's back in the world of the living. Kai reveals that 3 days ago, when Matt rang the bell 11 times, but not the fatal 12th time, Kai was able to cross over from hell into the real world. Kai offers to help them kill Cade if they can find a way to fully release him from hell. Alaric still wants to kill him. He's like, I think we can manage to defeat Cade without you. But Kai is like, wait, I can sweeten the deal. What if I wake Elena up? Kai's offer obviously gets Damon on board.
Right.
Damon speaks to Rick in private, and Alaric is like, no, Kai is a sociopath. His words, We've discussed this before.
Yeah, not ours. We didn't call him that.
And Damon is going to get them all killed by trusting Kai. And he's like, but you can have at it. I'm going to go barricade myself and my 2 girls in the armory. You know, the girls that, in case you've forgotten, Damon, Kai tried to murder while they were still in utero. And Damon is like, no, don't worry. I'm going to double cross Kai once I get what I want out of him.
Oh, sure.
I'm like,
now I'm convinced.
Damon, didn't Kai die as a heretic? So how do we know this new body doesn't still have vampiring? But anyway, Alaric tells him to do whatever he wants to do, but just do it far away from him and his kids. Alaric brings the twins to the armory, and he tells them that he is hoping that they just have to stay there for one night. Damon phones him, and Alaric is like, why did my Twitter just notify me that Kai tweeted again for the first time in 4 years from a diner? I didn't know Twitter gave you the location of people's tweets. Maybe I wasn't really on Twitter back then, but okay.
You can still do it now if someone opts to put their location like tag on in a tweet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a thing you can do. It's just most people don't do it because that's weird.
I love that Kai's Twitter @ is Cobra Kai and then his date of birth, because I'm like, yeah, you went away in the 90s.
the last
and the
movie you
Karate Kid
watched.
was still like a known franchise back then.
Little did he know the series would come out
Little
and
did he know.
revolutionize.
He tells Alaric that Bonnie is trying to help him get Kai to wake Elena up. Alaric is like, oh good, you roped her in too. I was hoping you would maximize on the collateral damage.
Yeah. Somebody in season 8 was just tired as hell about this man, and I appreciate it. It's just like,
Yeah.
actually, I'm tired of everything you do and you constantly getting pat on the back for it. Or, that's not the expression, slapped on the wrist for it.
I mean, but also
But
pat
also
on the
pat
back
on
for
the
bare
back.
minimum. Alaric calls Caroline and tells her that he and the girls are currently at the armory, and he asks if they could come by and meet her at the house tonight. Caroline is thrilled at the idea of seeing the girls again, but reminds Rick that Mystic Falls isn't 100% safe right now. And Alaric is like, yeah, maybe 100% was never a realistic goal. And he says it'll be good to bring them home, because he might need some parenting advice, and we see the twins are levitating crayons. And he's like, yeah, I'll explain when I see you, Caroline.
I was about to ask where they're getting the magic, but I think it's because they're in the armory. They're like absorbing ambient magic or something.
Yeah.
Crazy.
At the end of the episode, Rick brings the kids to Caroline's house, and the girls are getting a little feisty. Their powers are starting to flare out of control. Lizzie siphons Caroline, either instinctively or by mistake, and then Josie defends her mother by trying to cast Incendia on her sister.
Jesus
and they're like, whoa, 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 no playing with fire. Oh my gosh. Caroline's like, don't you ever say that. And Alaric says, yeah, they started acting out 3 days ago. I can't control it, and neither can they. Elsewhere, Damon fails to convince Kai that, saving Elena would redeem him and save him from hell. And Kai's like, psych, I'm running away with Elena's coffin.
Right.
Tee-hee. Episode 14. Caroline finds out that the girls' powers have been out of control enough that they were asked to leave their preschool recently. She is not impressed that Alaric has kept this
Where
from
are they
her.
getting magic at their preschool?
And I don't even know.
Are they witches?
Wait, they left. Oh, I know what it is. Okay.
Okay.
So she says, Rick, you told me that the magic and the siphoning was new, but if they've been kicked out of school, that means this has been going on for longer than 3 days.
Right.
And Alaric is like, okay, yeah, sorry, but you were also keeping secrets, because why have you moved all of your unused wedding stuff to the armory?
What?
Yeah, her stuff is like there for some reason. I don't know why.
But
It's a Caroline
what's the
thing.
comparison? How's that comparable?
It has nothing to do with the conversation they're having. I don't know why he brings it up. He's deflecting to her Stefan drama.
stupid.
And she admits that she and Stefan are having issues. But she's like, our kids, the focus right now.
Right.
And Alaric suggests that, maybe we can call someone because we're not equipped to handle what's happening with the girls. And then Caroline's like, there's no one we can call. And I'm like, Valerie. But she's like, there's no one we can call because the girls have not been triggered by magical development or like a coven secret or anything Rick is going to find in his books. And she suggests that maybe it's just emotional turmoil. Everything the girls have been through, that's what's to blame.
Okay.
And it's on them as parents to start making some positive changes, and that might help.
But neither of them are questioning where the magic's coming from. I feel like I'm the only one who's like confused by this.
I guess it's because they've been in the armory, in and out of the armory with
But they've
all
been
these
gone
artifacts.
for like weeks or months, right? So it's like, if it's been happening at their preschool, wherever they moved to, because Rick's been gone, you said, for a couple episodes.
Maybe when he left, he went to stay near the armory. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, the Salvatores come in with a dying, sort of half-conscious Kai. Kai offers to help Rick and Caroline with the twins because he's like, hello, I'm also a siphon from the Gemini Coven. Later on, Stefan and Rick discuss Kai. Rick asks what Stefan is thinking by bringing Kai there. And Stefan is like, well, I didn't know what else to do with him, and we're not even sure if or how he can be killed in this state. But we have to find a way to eliminate Cade, and, that's the priority. And then Alaric's like, no, for the umpteenth time, that's your priority.
My priority
My children and my
are
family's
my
safety
children.
is my priority. How many times must I say
I
this?
feel like all of you have wax in your ears when I speak about my kids. And that's your problem.
And he tells Stefan that Kai is literally his worst enemy.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I guess. I mean, he definitely started off as like Bonnie's arch nemesis,
Sure.
but at this point,
You kill somebody's wife, I think you will gain that status.
yeah. Stefan is like, well, as soon as we no longer need Kai, Alaric, you are welcome to do whatever you want with him. If anyone deserves to send Kai back to hell, it's you.
That's untrue, it's Bonnie, but fair. Tag team.
Bonnie
it.
got her bygones moment with
Silas.
with Silas.
That's true.
Kai tells Caroline that the twins' out-of-control powers are caused by being at the armory.
Okay.
That this is the worst possible place to bring a siphon because all of the magic in here is triggering them. Case in point, he absorbs some of that ambient magic, and with his powers recharged, he manages to escape.
Great. Great.
Stefan enlists Alaric's help in ringing the Maxwell bell repeatedly to weaken Cade while Stefan attempts to kill him. Since Alaric is not a Maxwell or a Donovan, he can do it without triggering the Hellfire. While Alaric is striking the bell, the twins call him from their tablet, and I'm like, iPad generation, yes!
It's begun. These are the Gen Alpha.
These 4-year-olds call their father from their tablet, and they're like, we heard a crash downstairs, and we don't know where mommy is. So Alaric is like, oh shit, it's Kai. He tells them to run to some predetermined hiding place, and he promises he'll be there soon. So he leaves his post, and with the bell no longer ringing, Stefan loses the upper hand that he had on Cade.
Yeah,
and I'm
well.
like, I can't blame you, Rick, I understand.
So he did warn
It's
him.
your kids.
He told him what his priority was.
Yeah. Alaric calls Caroline's cell, but Kai picks up and he tells Rick that he has incapacitated Caroline with the classic neck snap. Alaric asks why Kai doesn't just leave them all alone and go since he's already escaped. And Kai's like, no. I want to kill Josie and Lizzie because of my enduring hatred for all things Gemini.
And it's like, what do you gain? But of course, it's not about gain. It's very basic vector of their Gemini, so they must die.
Also, I guess unfinished business for him since he was trying to kill them the night that he died.
Yeah, so might as well.
And Alaric is like, I'm not going to let you hurt them. I'm coming for you. The Taken vibes don't work on Kai because he's too much of a cartoon supervillain trapped in a serial
Different
killer's
genre.
body.
You can't tell a screen villain that.
He's like, come, it'll be fun to have some competition. It's no fun hunting these preschoolers without you trying to stop me. I welcome it. Rick is able to reach the armory in time. He tricks Kai into an ambush using the old recorded voice trick.
Nice.
This time he plays it off like a voice recording on his phone.
Okay,
Bella.
listen. More technology to the disposal.
As he smacks Kai down, he says, that was for my kids. And then he strikes Kai again, and he was like, that's for me. And he prepares to hit Kai a third time, and he's like, this is for... But then Kai cuts him off with a cheap shot to his crotch.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Before he can name drop his sister. And he quickly regains the upper hand. As he raises his axe to kill Rick, suddenly Caroline appears behind Kai and snaps his neck,
Hell yeah.
taking him down for now. And she's like, for Joe. That's what he was going to say. And I'm like, yes!
Familia.
Later that night, Caroline comes to Rick and she says she's just finished talking to Bonnie on the phone and that Bonnie knows exactly what to do about Kai. This is when Bonnie enlists the twins' help in like trapping him in a new prison world.
Right.
Caroline says she's a little embarrassed that she blamed their parenting skills for what's been going on with the girls when the answer was right in front of them. The armory of it all. Again, I'm like, were they here when they said take the girls away? Is this where
Did
they
he
went?
just move to the
guess.
armory? How is that safer? There's always shit going on at the armory. I honestly thought they went back to Texas or to his motel or something. I don't know.
Alaric tells her that, no, you weren't wrong though. know, I came out here knowing that I needed to find a school that would be good for Josie and Lizzie. But what school exists for kids like ours?
Right.
And he tells Caroline that then he stumbled on the perfect place. He wants to start a school for Lizzie and Josie and other supernatural kids like them. And Caroline points out that there's a big difference between being a professor and running a school. And I'm like, well, tell that to Charles Xavier, girl.
Professor S, here we go.
Rick agrees and he's like, yeah, I know it won't be easy. And that's why I need a collaborator. Someone who knows how to create a safe, loving, supportive space for kids. Someone like you.
Oh.
And Caroline still seems a bit unsure, and Rick is like, you don't have to answer right away. Just think about it. As Bonnie leaves Kai trapped in his new prison world, he's like, well, by the way, Catherine's back. So. Episode 15, penultimate episode. June wedding! We're planning a June wedding! Woo. The gang discuss how they're going to kill Catherine, and Dorian, who I guess is now like
he's in
junior Mystic Falls member.
Yeah, he's actually going to graduate any week now.
Dorian suggests that since Cade was killed using a dagger made out of his bones, they have to make a dagger out of Catherine's bones. So they plan on luring her out by organizing a wedding for Stefan and Caroline, which they want to have anyway, because they say that Catherine is so obsessed with Stefan, she would never miss his wedding to someone else.
Always has been, always will be. You know it's true.
Alaric says that meanwhile, he and Dorian will search for an alternative to fight Catherine with. Later on, Alaric brings the twins, who are going to be the flower girls, to see Caroline before she gets ready for her wedding.
Cute.
Caroline is happy, but she reminds Rick that they had decided it wasn't safe for the girls. And Alaric's like, yeah, but Catherine would be suspicious if your children weren't at your wedding to Stefan. So, for the sake of the ambush. But he does tell her that Stefan called in a favor from Valerie.
Yay.
In brackets, I'm like, OMG, Valerie, I hope she's doing great.
Exists.
She has a soft spot for Gemini twins, so she's put a protective spell on them. Caroline thanks Rick for bringing them, and before he leaves, Alaric hugs her and tells her to be happy. And it seems like he himself is not going to be at the wedding, and I'm like, oh, okay, I thought we were past any sense of, but
I mean,
pin in that, because I did realize something later on.
It's still like, it's also like the last time he was at a wedding, you know?
Yeah, that was my pin.
Yeah, it really is just like, he's got wedding trauma, so I don't blame him.
Later on, at the armory, Dorian comes to speak to Alaric and tells him that he has been reading about psychic energy manipulation. Dorian says that they might be able to destroy hell by creating a massive amount of psychic energy that breaches the plane of hell.
Okay.
Rick is weirdly stoic. He tells Dorian that, I came to Mystic Falls to hunt vampires after my wife went missing, and how he desired to slay Damon as revenge for turning Isabel into a vampire. But he tells Dorian that eventually he got past that because he didn't have the energy to hate someone forever. And he says, we've all made terrible mistakes in our lives, done things that no apology can heal, but you just have to keep going, trying to find some new happiness, no matter how much you've lost. Rick tells Dorian that the strange thing is, losing people is actually what brought the Mystic Falls gang together. It's how they found each other. It's what made them a family. Finale, we're finally here.
Let's go.
I was feeling epic. At the Forbes residence, Stefan calls Caroline to let her know that he's been looking for Elena, whose body Catherine has snatched, and that he's now going to search the high school. Alaric enters the room. He's like frantically packing so that they can leave Mystic Falls because the town is about to blow up and be consumed in hellfire. And he's like, Bonnie's already in the car with the girls. We gotta go. And then Caroline's like, okay, yeah, you go ahead. I'm gonna stay here and help Stefan. And Alaric's like, no. No, you're coming with us. And Caroline says, well, Rick, Damon's not going to leave Mystic Falls without Elena. And Alaric's like, well, that's not your problem, Caroline.
Right.
I don't need to remind you what it's like to lose your mother.
Yep.
Don't make me have to tell those girls that you died because you put somebody else before them.
Yeah.
Caroline's like, you won't have to do that. I promise you I will get out of Mystic Falls safely. You just go on ahead. Alaric and Bonnie arrive safely with the twins. Alaric sends the girls off to go change their clothes, and then he speaks to Bonnie about his emotional conflict. He says that it's not that he doesn't care. He cares about Elena.
Obviously.
And he cares about Damon. And I'm like, oh yeah, your first surrogate child,
right.
Elena. Like, obviously you care.
Everyone keeps telling him shit like he doesn't know Elena's in there. He's done the calculus.
Bonnie assures him that no, Damon knows you care about him and Elena. And Alaric is like, I don't want to fail Damon and Elena, but I cannot fail my daughters.
Right.
And then he adds that they also need their mother. And Bonnie reassures him that, if we could help, we could. But as it stands,
not much you can do about hellfire.
And then she spots the little Hail Mary that Alaric and Dorian were working on. And Alaric's like, yeah, me and Dorian figured out we need like a few million volts of mystical energy, give or take. And once we realized that, we were like, okay, well, that's not going to work, obviously. And then Bonnie's like, wait a minute, maybe we can use the energy contained in Hellfire itself. Caroline comes in, having made it out of Mystic Falls, and Rick and the twins are very happy to see her. They're at the armory at this point. Caroline was like, what's going on? And Rick is like, I'll explain everything in the car. Let's go. Caroline and Alaric are driving out of town, and Alaric tells her that Stefan is planning to stay and sacrifice himself to save the town and stop Catherine. And Caroline sobs in despair. It is nice that Rick is there for her. Ultimately, the day is saved, as we know.
Yes.
Stefan dies. Damon is able to take the cure from Elena and live a mortal life with her once Bonnie loopholes one last time and wakes her up. And the epilogue shows us that Alaric has indeed opened his school.
Yeah.
At the Salvatore boarding house, though, not at the armory as he was implying.
Oh, was he
spoke to
initially
Caroline
suggesting
about
the
it.
armory? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because he was like looking around that place and being like, yeah, we could open up a school here. And then ultimately it's like, well, no, he doesn't. He does it at the boarding house.
Yeah. Honestly, better. That's what it's built for.
I didn't know it was big enough to be a school, though. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean-
very big for people to live in, but like classrooms?
I don't know if in
Where
the
we-
show it's the case, but in the book it was for like a lot of students would stay there who were going to a nearby college, I think. It's a
Oh,
boarding
okay.
house.
Okay.
There's rooms and rooms and rooms.
That's fair. For what it's worth, it's Damon who gives the Salvatore house to Rick and Caroline. He says he felt that would be Stefan's last wish. Salvatore School for the Young and Gifted. He's in his X-Men era.
Yeah. It's a great look for him. I do wish that it did continue. I mean, as is set up in the epilogue, it is a collaborated effort between him and Caroline, but obviously in Legacies, Caroline is not there for most of the show. And that could be to do with the fact that like maybe Candace King had like, I mean, she had just had multiple children, so maybe she wanted to stay home, focus on the family. Maybe she wanted to move on to another project. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is largely Rick who takes over in Legacies. So that's the other thing too, is that like post this epilogue, his story keeps going. Those twins, they grow up and he's got 2 teenagers in the future.
They're 2 of the leads
Yeah.
in the show.
The 3 of them are 3 of the 4 like main characters. The other one I won't mention because, you know, spoilers. So yeah, interesting stuff for Rick in the future.
It's nice that as his scene ends, because like a few of them have like these people they've lost and loved who are at peace, who are watching them. And for Rick, it's Josie who's like watching him and her kids. And I'm like, oh, Josette, I should say.
Yeah, you did say Josie. I was like, nobody's ever called her that. But oh, that's so sweet.
It's Dr. Josette Lachlan. I keep calling her Josie.
'Cause of
I don't
Josie.
know. like she's my friend.
Right.
And I know her like that.
Acting like you're on a nickname basis with Dr. Joe Loveland.
Yeah, that's all she wrote for Alaric Saltzman.
Alaric Saltzman. Final thoughts. Solid character.
Yeah.
Doesn't always have like central stuff going on, but very like reliable, fill out the cast, main cast character. Very interesting arc over the first 3 seasons. Last 3 seasons are kind of like up and down, but I love him and Joe. I love him and those kids.
Yeah.
I love him and Caroline when they're eventually in their co-parenting era. I love that now that I've seen Buffy, it does make sense that he's like the childs for the group. His learned half as complemented with his vampire hunting, alcoholic, action hero half is very interesting. Forever baffled by, and honestly, maybe it makes a lot of sense, friendship with Damon. He's always on the raw end of that. And to be fair, anyone who's a friend with Damon, that's just kind of the deal.
Yeah.
But that's his business and not mine. He's a grown-ass man. Yeah, I hope he does find happiness in his future. I don't foresee it. Running a school and having 3 kids, tough as hell. Maybe he does it. Who knows?
It's beautiful, though, that from where he began, where it's like, oh, I wanted this life with Isabel that she wasn't all that interested in, and she was obsessed with the supernatural, which I was like, that's silly and not real. He ends up with this family that he loves and running a school for the supernatural.
Yeah.
And being this person who is like doing all this research and has all this knowledge on all these mythical creatures. And I'm like, look at you. Look at how you grew.
You've done it. I don't know, Matt Davis? Do we need to talk about it?
I mean, I'd rather not. I don't
Rather
have
not.
anything.
Nothing nice to say.
Legally Blonde was a nice film,
You know?
I guess.
You know? And maybe we should have associated him more with that character than with Rick Saltzman. Successfully separated. You know, they talk about separate the art from the artist. I can separate the man from the character in this case. I love Rick. He's great.
I do, yeah. That's, in fact, when it comes to the Vampire Diaries cast, that is the safest thing to do, I've learned.
Certainly.
Too many times.
Honestly, as I brought it up, I was like, do we need to keep doing the cast post-mortem thing? Because every time you find out something you don't want to know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
maybe we'll just retire that one.
Well, thank you guys for listening to the tale of Alaric Saltzman. Quite a juicy character, actually. I was pleasantly surprised. If you guys have any questions or thoughts, you can email us at animalattackpod@gmail.com. You can tweet us at animattackpod. That's at ANIM AttackPod on Twitter. And you'll find our link tree in the bio, which has all of our online stuff. Till next time, bye-bye.
Cheers.